Never a sad thing, sir.
Never a sad thing. Great. At least that's the our exterior part. No, exterior part. You should tell that you are not sad. Whether you are sad or not, I don't know. Thank God, God has not given me that power to understand whether you're really happy or you're just pretending, or what is happening inside. So if that is the case, no, it would have been a big problem for me. So I hope you're all doing great, reading well for your exams. Most of you are writing in May 2023. Some of you might be writing in November 2023. I hope beyond that nobody is writing. At least those who are writing are not here. I think that's the thing. I hope you would have filled the examination form. Everything is done. Everything is taken care of. So you're now under the full pressure to finish off with the syllabus and be done with it and go and write the exams. You're in the hurry to complete. Whatever happens, it's okay. First, that exam day should come. That pressure will always be there. See, the word exam by itself inherently has that pressure, right? So exams are the best and the classic example for inherent risk. Exam word itself has a lot of pressures, a lot of risk challenges involved, and the possibility of fraud arising from that area is higher. So we have to be very, very careful. As an auditor, there is a lot of risk that we all carry. So we have to be very, very careful. So on that note, let's start. So this is a revision session. That means you would have already read and you're revising things. Correct? No? That is the assertion and the premise on which this session will be carried on and conducted, right? It's not that all, I don't know, we have heard about all the other 7 subjects. The subject is supposed to be introduced today. So we thought that auditing is now starting. No. Auditing is done, right? We have completed the syllabus. ಎಲ್ಲ ಇವಾಗ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಎಲ್ಲ ಬುಕ್ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಎದುರಿಸಿ ಕೂತ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿರಿ ಅಂತ ಬರ್ಲಿ ರಿವಿಷನ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಅನ್ನೋ ವೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ ನೀವು? ಎಲ್ಲ ಕವರ್ ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ ಅಲ್ವಾ ಮೆಟೀರಿಯಲ್? ಐ ಮೀನ್ ಇಫ್ ಇನ್ ಕೇಸ್ ನೀವು ಮೆಟೀರಿಯಲ್ ಓದಿದ್ರೆ, ಓಪನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು ಅಲ್ವಾ? ಎಲ್ಲ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ? ಅಟ್ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ಈ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಮುಟ್ಟಿದೀವಿ. ಒಳಗಡೆ ಹೋಗಿ ನಾವು ಅಧ್ಯಯನ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಥವಾ ರಿಸರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಅದೊಂದು ಮೇಲ್ಗಡೆ ಟಚ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಗೋ ರೆಫರೆನ್ಸ್ ಆದ್ರೂ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ? ಅಟ್ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ಅಷ್ಟು ಕಾನ್ಫಿಡೆನ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಇವಾಗ? on 8th of March 2023 ಅಷ್ಟು ಕಾನ್ಫಿಡೆನ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ? ಅಷ್ಟು ಕಾನ್ಫಿಡೆನ್ಸ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ಸಾಕು, ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ಸ್ ಆರಾಮಾಗಿ ನಡೆಯುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನನಗೆ ಭಯ ಆಗತ್ತೆ. ಬೈಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಡಿ, ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಬೇಕೊಂಡು. So the past 1 week I was having a severe cough. If they had asked me to take a session a week ago, I wouldn't have been in a position to take. ನೀವೆಲ್ಲ ಗೊತ್ತಿತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಬೈಕೊಂಡಿರ್ತೀರ ನೀವು ರಿವಿಷನ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ. ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಾ ಪ್ರೇ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೆ ಅವರಿಗೆ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇವತ್ತು ಬಂದಿರಿ. Okay, let's start. First things first, we have to do the prayer. Essay 200.
Overall objectives of the independent auditor and conduct of an audit in accordance with the standards on auditing.
Accordance with standards on auditing. 210.
Agreeing the terms
of audit engagement.
Agreeing to the terms of audit engagement. 220.
Quality control of an audit of
financial statements.
Quality control in an audit of financial statements. 230.
audit
documentation.
ಯಾಕೆ ಯಾರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಇಲ್ಲ? ಮರ್ತೋಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀರಾ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡರ್ಡ್?
No sir.
No sir.
Okay. 240. Auditor's responsibility relating to fraud in an audit of financial statements. 250.
Consideration of laws and regulations in audit of financial statements.
Consideration of laws and regulations in an audit of financial statements. Essay 260.
Communicating with those charged with governance.
Communication with those charged with governance. 265.
Communicating deficiencies in internal control with those charged with governance and management.
Communicating deficiencies in internal control with those charged with governance and management. Very good. 299. Joint audit of financial statements. 300.
Planning and
audit of financial
statements. 315.
Identifying
and assessing
the risk of material misstatements to understand
Identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment. 320.
Materiality in planning and performing the audit.
Materiality in planning and performing the audit. 330.
auditor's
Auditor's response is to assess risk. 402.
Audit
Audit consideration for entities using service
Organization.
Audit considerations relating to an entity using service organization. 450.
Identification and identification of mistake entity.
Evaluation of misstatements identified during the audit. That is for out of syllabus ಅಂತ ನೀವು ಮರೆತು ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀರಾ. 500.
Audit
Evidence.
Evidence, very easy name to remember. 501.
Audit
evidence
Specific consideration for the selected items.
Specific consideration for selected items. 505.
External
External
confirmation.
External confirmation. 510.
initial audit
Engagements.
Engagements, opening
Balance.
opening balances.
Why are you so sad? What happened? 510 has not done anything wrong. Standard is there. You have to be happy. 510 initial audit engagements, opening balances. 520
Analytical
procedure.
procedures that we don't analyze. 530
Audit
Sampling.
sampling. That's what we have been doing so far. Selective reading, right? 10 chapters, 4 chapters. ಇದೊಂದ್ರೆ 20 marks, ಇದೊಂದ್ರೆ 50 marks ಆ ತರ ಓದ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗೋದು. Audit sampling. SA 550
related
Party disclosures.
parties. 540 ಕೇಳಿಲ್ಲ ನೀವು ಹೇಳಲ್ಲ. 560
subsequent events.
Subsequent events.
events. 570
Going concern.
concern. Where are you going? That is the concern. Track ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ, outside track ಹೋಗಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಅಂತ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕು. 580
Written representations.
Presentations.
presentations. 600
Using the work
The work of another auditor.
using the work of another auditor. 610
Using
the work of
internal auditor.
using the work of internal auditor. 620
Using the work of experts.
using the work of auditors expert. 700
forming an opinion and reporting on financial
Statements.
forming an opinion and reporting on financial statements. 701
communicating key audit
Matters in an
independent
audit
auditor.
report.
very good. Key audit matters in the independent auditors report. 705
Modifications to the opinion of the independent auditors and auditors report.
modifications to the opinion and independent auditors report. 706
Emphasis on
Matter by
Independent auditors.
Independent auditors.
EOM and OM in the independent auditors report. 710
Compared information.
Discussion
Comparative financial statements.
corresponding figures and comparative financial information. 720
Auditor's responsibility related to
Other information and
auditors responsibilities relating to other information. That's all. So with this we complete all the names of the standards put together. These are called standards on auditing applied when do you apply these standards?
before and during and after the conduct of an audit.
Conduct of an audit. Very good. Audit of what?
Financial statements.
Financial statement.
Financial statements. See, the essays are applied when you are auditing. This is very important. You are providing audit services relating to historical financial information. You are going to apply these standards. More so, these standards are applied for the financial information or the financial statements which are prepared under the general purpose financial reporting framework. SA 200, entire 700 series together with the previous standards are applied when you are auditing the financial statements which are prepared under general purpose framework. Now, if you are auditing any financial statement which is prepared under a special purpose framework, that may also be an audit, but you will be conducting that audit in accordance with 800 series, not in accordance with 700 series. What is the example? What is the example for a financial statement prepared under special purpose framework?
government.
Sorry. No, we will not have time. So you have to be fast. If you say you know, otherwise you tell you don't know. I will discuss. Now, let's say you're preparing the financial statements for an entity which is situated in US or UK. The holding company requires the subsidiary companies financial statements for group consolidation. And you have to prepare the the financial statements in accordance with the group accounting policy. So this financial statement is not a general purpose financial statements. General purpose financial statements is what we generally prepare for other users in India. That is Schedule 3. You're talking about a company. So if you are auditing the financial statements in this, for meeting these requirements, then you will have to follow 800 series. Now, as a chartered accountant, I'm using the word chartered accountant, you have to be very careful. You can provide auditing services, audit of historical financial statements, which is covered under your standards on auditing. Now, you can provide review services. Now, that is covered under your standards on review engagements. What is a review? A review is an assurance, which is a limited assurance engagement. Audit is what?
Reasonable assurance.
Audit is a reasonable assurance engagement. Review is a limited assurance engagement where you are going to give your opinion in a negative format, negative form. Nothing has come to your attention that causes you to believe that there is a misstatement, is different from telling that there are no misstatements. You're able to make out the difference. So that is a review. And you can also provide some assurance services. Assurance services. Assurance simply means what? What do you mean by assurance?
Affirmation.
Affirmation. Okay, very good. Giving confidence. I assure you that you are all going to pass the examination. So assurance is anything which you give that becomes more persuasive for the other person. Now, if you are saying something, it will be more influencing. You are influencing. You are trying to give them that confidence. Bharosa. That is what is called assurance. So you are giving some assurance on the controls of a service organization. Example. Now, you know user entity service organization. Now, I am the user entity. I don't do any payroll activity. What do? I outsource it to one firm, Mayak Fatima firm, which is a payroll consulting entity which processes payroll for many of the clients. Now, if I have to, I as an auditor of Siddarth Limited or Prithvi Limited, if I have to rely on the controls, I have to ask Mayak Fatima, do you have all these controls? Because she is the one who is processing the payroll. Now, Mayak Fatima asks the auditor, some practitioner, and say, you please evaluate our controls and give an assurance report that the controls are all working fine. So is it an audit that the person is giving? Let's say Lipika is being appointed. Is Lipika giving audit services? No, she is giving assurance. Assurance on what? Assurance on the controls which are implemented at her entity, in her organization. So these are assurance engagements. Auditors can give certain assurance, can engage in certain assurance engagements. If you are doing that, you have to follow standards on assurance engagements. Now, because of your expertise in the areas of accounting, auditing, you may provide some related services. What is the example? Let's say there is one entity. Who is responsible for the preparation of financial statements?
Management.
Management does not possess necessary expertise. They can't ask the auditor to prepare and then audit. So they probably would ask someone else, some other chartered accountant, to compile the financial statements, to prepare the financial statements. So this is a related services. Whatever activity you do, you have to ensure that you do your best. It conforms to quality. So put together, all these things are called, what is it called?
Related services.
Excuses.
Related services is one bucket. What is it called?
Standards
Very good.
of-
EQCS, engagement and quality control standards. Any activity that you do is called engagement. An audit is an engagement. A review is an engagement. Compilation is an engagement. Providing assurance is an engagement. Now, for this engagement, when you are performing, it has to conform to quality. That's why we have standards. Now, all these standards are put together called engagement and quality control standards, given by, issued by ICAI. Under which body, under which discipline, under Auditing and Assurance Standard Board, AASB. ICI is here. Under ICI, we have a board, Auditing and Assurance Standard Board. Auditing and Assurance Standard Board has issued a group of standards which are to be followed, which is called Engagement and Quality Control Standards. Now, how have we drafted these standards? These standards are drawn. These standards are taken from international standards. We have borrowed the literature from the international standard. So there's an international body called IFAC, International Federation of Accountants, where ICI is one of the founding members. Now, under that, there is International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board, which has issued international auditing standards. That is what we have also adopted with here and there modifications. Modifications means we have incorporated some additional paragraphs. We have deleted some paragraphs which are there in the international standards. That's how we have got this literature. Now, what we are focusing at interlevel is only on the audit. So we are focusing on the auditing aspect. That's why the name of the paper is called Auditing and Assurance. By doing audit, you are giving assurance. Now, what is audit?
An audit is an independent examination of financial statements of any entity, whether profit oriented or not, irrespective of its size or legal firm, when such an examination is conducted with a view of expressing an opinion thereon. So, this definition summarizes the entire activity that you would perform. Now, it's an independent. Now, the word independent has lot of meaning, has lot of attributes associated with it. Now, what do you mean by independence? What is independence? Independence in mind, independence in appearance.
Independence should be implemented in the form of independence in mind and independence in appearance. So what do you mean by independence in the first place?
The judgment should not be influenced by another person who may engage.
Very good, perfect. Judgment should not be influenced by anything. Judgment of a person not subordinate to the will and wishes of the person who is appointing you. Just because the shareholders are appointing you, you should not act for them. You should not act in favor of whatever they are telling. You should independently assess the situation and give your independent opinion. Just because I am 99% shareholder, if I say you please give clean opinion, you should not say yes, okay, fine, I will give clean opinion. So that is what is the concept of independence is. Now, this independence is one of the fundamental principles of professional ethics. So we have code of ethics issued by the Ethical Standards Board, ESB. Right? So that talks about independence, independence in mind, independence in appearance. If nobody is around you also, you should be independent. See, now when someone is looking at me, my actions will be conscious, correct? No? The moment invigilator walks into the classroom, your behavior changes. The moment he walks out, right? So this is independence in appearance, how you appear to be to the outside public. Independence in mind means what? Even nobody is also around, you should behave the same way. You are telling that you are independent. You're in mind, you're independent, but your actions are not stating, or your actions are not confirming that you are appearing to be independent. Outside person should not perceive that you are having some sort of relationship with the entity. That is what you have to ensure. So we have a lot of threats to independence. Correct, no? Intimidation threat, familiarity threat, self-review threat, self-interest threat. What else?
Advocacy threat.
Advocacy threats. These are all the threats that we have. And in order to overcome these threats, we have to put some shield, which is called safeguards to the threats to independence. What safeguards are you going to put in place? This is very important from the examination perspective. Independence and threats to independence is very, very crucial. They will test in MCQ or they will test in correct or incorrect. I'm sure Asha ma'am would have explained all these concepts and you know. Understood?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not going to touch upon it because Asha ma'am might take this again separately. So that's why. Okay, this is what. Now, what is the objective of our audit?
to obtain reasonable assurance whether
Very
the
good.
financial statement as a whole are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error, thereby enabling an auditor to express an opinion that the financial statements are prepared in all material respects in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. And the second objective is to report on financial statement communicated as per standards on auditing required and in accordance with auditor's finding.
Very good. Perfect. That is what is given in your essay 200, the objectives of your audit, to provide reasonable assurance. What is reasonable assurance?
Which is not absolute assurance.
High,
High
but not absolute level of assurance. Why is it so?
Inherent
Very
limitations.
good. Because of inherent limitations to the audit, it is only high, but not absolute. So you're going to give reasonable assurance on what? On internal controls, on budgetary practices? No, on the financial statements. Now we restrict our scope only to what? Financial statements, not even cost records, unless we are appointed to do so. Not on the secretarial records, unless we are appointed to do so. Right? On the financial statements. And what opinion will you give? You will give that the financial statements as a whole. What do you mean? What is the significance of the word as a whole? Don't be bothered or don't focus on small items which does not have any importance when you're talking or looking at a big picture. When you're talking in crores, hundreds will not be a matter. Thousands will not be a matter. Even lakh may not be a matter. When you're talking in lakhs, thousands will be a matter. Hundreds will also be a matter. When you're talking in hundreds, even ones and tens will be a matter of concern. So as a whole, financial statements as a whole are what? Are free from material misstatements. So this is the opinion that you give. So there are a lot of words here that we need to understand. One is misstatement, free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. So it is talking about intention. Intention doesn't matter. Whether that misstatement is on account of an error or on account of a fraud, it doesn't matter. You say whether are there any misstatements. When you perform the audit, you will say that the financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatements, whether due to fraud or error, and is prepared in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. Now, we need to understand the term misstatement. What do you mean by misstatement?
Difference in amount, classification, disclosure and presentation of a item reported in the financial statement with the amount, classification, disclosure and presentation that should be required as per the applicable financial reporting framework.
Perfect. It is a difference. Misstatement is equal to ACPD of a reported item minus ACPD of item in accordance with AFRF. That's all. Very simple. Correct. No, the misstatement can arise either from fraud or error. That also you need to include. The definition doesn't stop there. It also has the word misstatement includes items which might arise either due to fraud or error. Very good. Now, so we need to now focus on not just the amounts, but also on the presentation, classification and disclosure. An item which is supposed to be classified as non-current is classified as current. Though the amounts are there, sir, loan is there, loan is shown and not non-current, but it is to be repaid within the next 1 year. Sir, somewhere it is shown, no. And first of all, I'm very sorry. Wish you all a very happy Women's Day. I'm very sorry for all the great, strong, successful ladies out there. Wish you all a very happy Women's Day. I'm very sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, let's come back. Now, presentation. I am now presenting it somewhere else. Classification. An item which is to be classified as non-current is classified as current, and vice versa. You can't say, sir, numbers are somewhere there in the financial statements. Apple, mangoes. Go to fruit salad because you have not ordered fruit salad. I've ordered only apple. So I have to get only apple. Right? So this is one thing. Presentation. See, you have to present it in an understandable manner because financial statements has a lot of attributes. Correct? No? You have to ensure that the financial statements meet. Otherwise, it should not be like your working notes. It should be like a theoretical answer which is given by suggested answers of ICAI. That is about presentation. Disclosure, related party transaction. Sir, 1 laksha ashte anta madilla. Leases mention madilla. Deferred tax solpane ettu adika bitbididivi. No, you have to disclose. Contingent liability is a disclosure standard. They have not disclosed. So it's even though it is not having any impact on the numbers, it will impact the financial statements. As an auditor, you are also concerned with these type of errors or misstatements. Misstatements first includes these type of wrong things. Understood? So this is about misstatement. Now, what is applicable financial reporting framework? This is very, very important.
It is a framework adopted by the management are those charged with governance for the preparation of financial statement to determine the nature of the entity and the object of the financial statement. Object of the financial statement are as required by the laws or regulations.
Perfect. Anybody else wants to add? That's all. No, sir. Whatever she said is perfect. What is the most important word here? The financial reporting framework adopted by the management and where appropriate, that is acceptable. You have ignored the word acceptable, which is not acceptable. It is acceptable in view of the nature of the entity and the objective of reporting. So that means what? I am an entity who is required to follow Ind AS. That is my financial reporting framework. So I cannot prepare financial statements under Schedule 3, Division 1. I have to follow Schedule 3, Division 2. Why? Because that is acceptable in view of nature of my entity. My entity's nature is such that I have to follow Ind AS. Let's say I'm a subsidiary of a listed company. Even though I may not have any turnover, I may not have any capital, just because I am the subsidiary of a listed company, what is acceptable? Ind AS is acceptable. Understood? I'm a small company. I'm a small company. For me, what is acceptable? Normal IGAAP. That is your all the existing accounting standards, and Schedule 3, Division 1 is applicable. That is acceptable in view of the nature of my entity and the objective of reporting. Applicable financial reporting framework has two important components. What are they? Very good. Compliance framework. Can you hear me? Is there a lag?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
We can
We
hear
can
you, sir.
hear you, sir.
Okay, there's no lag. No?
No, sir.
Oh, sir.
Why are you all so sad? What happened? I know 8th March I should not have come. I didn't realize that it's a Women's Day. It's a day for you to be very happy. But what to do? It has happened. No, you be happy. What can I do? It's already done.
We
Why are
are
you so sad?
happy, sir.
You're happy, but your expression says otherwise. No, who will tell that you're happy? By looking at your face, nobody will tell that you're happy. How can you tell? If this is your face when you're happy, then how will you be when you're sad? What happened? What is your problem? Everything is fine, no?
Yes, sir. Wonderful.
Not that I have superpowers, I can sort it out, but just as a cursory sake, I'm asking. Everything is fine, no? Don't tell that everything was fine so far. No, that's a very damaging statement. Everything was fine. Please use present tense. Everything is fine. It was not fine, but it is fine makes me very happy. I know it is not the truth, but it's okay. Okay. Now, two components of what? Compliance framework and fair presentation framework. What is a fair presentation framework? It contains acknowledgements which are either explicit or implicit. Explicitly, what does explicit or implicit is what? They provide more and more disclosures than those required by the statute to meet the better understanding, to achieve the better presentation, fair presentation of the financial statements to the users. That's why if you see the financial statement Schedule 3 initially states one thing very clear. What is it? These are the minimum requirements. If an entity is required to present anything in accordance with accounting standards, or if it has to provide anything beyond what is there, it is free to do so. So what do? We provide more and more disclosures. We provide more and more notes for the users to understand. If you see any entity's financial, reasonably big entity, the financial statements will run into 30 pages, 20, 30 pages. You will have significant accounting policies, notes explaining each and every item of the financial statement. Right? So why? Because they want users to understand it. So that is fair presentation. Now, what is a compliance framework? A framework, and in an extremely, in a fair presentation framework only, in an extremely rare situation, rarest of the rarest cases, an entity may be required to depart from the disclosure only to achieve fair presentation. For example, in accounting standards, we have a principle. When can you depart from the compliance with an existing accounting standard or a principle? When it ensures fair presentation. Correct? No? If you follow this particular principle, then it might defeat the purpose of your entity, or it might have problems more than the benefit. Let's say there is one serious case going on. At this point in time, understand, at this point in time, I am not in a position to disclose anything. If I disclose, it will be a problem for me only in the court of law. Now, just because AS 29 asks me to provide notes under contingent liabilities, if I disclose this information, don't you think it is going to backfire me? So what do? I will take a stand and say, I will not follow what is said in AS 29 in the best interest of the company or the organization. Let's say I am supplying some goods to the defense sector. Now that's very confidential. I cannot disclose more. So I will have to obviously depart from those disclosures. Why? Because it ensures the best interest. The best interest is kept in the mind. So only in these cases, you may have to depart from the disclosure. It's very rare to happen. This will be provided in your fair presentation framework. Under compliance framework, it follows what is required by a law or a regulation, but it does not contain acknowledgements. That means what? Compliance framework, if you're preparing, you are not going to give more and more disclosures, more and more notes to the users. You're only doing it for the purpose of complying with the law and a regulation. Classic example is what? Mask. Mask. Safety. Helmet. Fine cut. Accident ಆದರೆ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಹಾರದೆ ಹೆಲ್ಮೆಟ್, ಅದು ಗಾಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಜೋರ ಹೋಗ್ತಾರೆ, ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಹಾರದೆ ಹೆಲ್ಮೆಟ್. ಅದೇನು ಸೇವ್ ಮಾಡಲ್ಲ ನಾವು, ಅದು ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ತಲೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಇದ್ರೆ ಪೊಲೀಸ್ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಹಿಡಿಯಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಕಾರಣಕ್ಕೆ. ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಂಪ್ಲೈನ್ಸ್ ಫ್ರೇಮ್ವರ್ಕ್. ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಅ fair presentation framework. Now, why is it important for us to understand? Why is it important for us to make a distinction between compliance and fair presentation? Fast revision.
Sir, because wherever we need to give more disclosures for the users, we can go with fair presentation. And in compliance procedure, we can do as much required by the law. So it's
okay. Anybody else? No, very important. This concept we've discussed, no? Now, if it's a fair presentation framework, only then you are allowed to use the word true and fair. True and fair is not a free word for you to use, like your constitutional right. Everybody talks constitutional right, constitutional right. True and fair is not like that. You can use the word true and fair, you as an auditor, only if you're auditing financial statements, if they're prepared under fair presentation framework. The words true and fair, you cannot be used. Where? In the case of compliance framework. So what do you use? What wordings are you going to use there?
Free from material misstatement.
Free from material misstatement.
Free from material misstatement. No, it is prepared in all material respects. That's all. Right? You're not going to use the financial statements shall give a true and fair view. You're going to use the financial statements are prepared in all material respects which complies with the regulations of XYZ. Understood? This is about applicable financial reporting framework. So you are going to give an opinion. So we are coming back to the objective, right? So opinion, reasonable assurance, the financial statements are free from material misstatements and are prepared in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. And you're also report in accordance with essays. Not just your opinion, independent auditor's opinion. In lot of areas, there is a requirement for you to communicate. For example, to identify some deficiencies in internal controls, you're required to communicate it to management, right? You, in the course of your functions as an auditor, you see some fraud, you are required to report it to board. That is those charged with governance. There is a reporting requirement. Now, if you are as an auditor, you identify some material uncertainties, you're required to discuss that and report it to the management. And in some cases, you're also required to report on the operating effectiveness of the internal controls. There is a reporting requirement. So all these comes under our objectives. Clear? Twin objectives. One is to obtain reasonable assurance. Second one is to report on your findings. That's all. And in accordance, communicate in accordance with essays. Now, how do you obtain reasonable assurance? First,
Sufficient and appropriate audit evidence.
by collecting, very good, by collecting sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. How do you collect sufficient and appropriate audit evidence?
By
Audit
performing the
procedures.
procedures.
Very good. By performing necessary relevant audit procedures, right? So it is important for us to understand the word SAI, otherwise we will SAI. Right? SAI means what? Sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. It has got two limbs: sufficiency, appropriateness. Sufficiency is
Measure of quantity.
very good. Measure of quantity of audit evidence. How much of evidence have you collected? Right? It is affected by what? Sufficiency is affected by what?
Materiality.
Very good.
Risk of material
Materiality.
misstatement.
Risk of
Auditor's judgment.
Size of population.
Perfect. MRP. Right? That's what we discussed. The sufficiency is affected by three parameters. One is materiality. Second one is risk of material misstatement. Third one is size and characteristics of population. That is sufficiency. Then the next aspect is what? Appropriateness. Appropriateness talks about what?
Quality.
Quality of the audit evidence. That means it's
Relevance and reliability.
very good. It's relevance and reliability. Appropriateness has two limbs. One is relevance and the other one is reliability. Correct, no? Now you need to be very careful. Just by collecting more and more evidence cannot be compromised with the quality. You can't even say that I have collected quality evidence, so only two, three evidence is sufficient. It has to be some combination of both quantity as well as quality. So that is what SS are clearly specifying. The evidence that you obtain should be sufficient as well as appropriate. When we talk about sufficient, it is about how much of evidence have you collected. How is it dependent? It is dependent on the auditor's professional judgment. If I am verifying sales, for me, checking 100 sale invoices gives me enough confidence. For you, it might be 200. For someone else, it might be 90. So it is based on auditor's professional judgment. There is no formula that I can give or that anybody can give to say what is sufficient. It is all based on the circumstances and the audit that you are handling. Now, appropriateness is relevance and reliability. Relevance means what? What do you mean by relevance? Relevant. It should meet the purpose or the objective. Correct, no? Now, as an auditor, you want to verify the valuation assertion. Valuation assertion. What audit procedure is relevant?
Recalculation.
Recalculation will be the appropriate relevant audit procedure. You can't perform physical verification. That's what most of us will tell. Remember one MCQ we solved. Valuation assertion. Everybody gave physical verification. Observation is not a relevant audit procedure. And then remember, we also solved one tricky true or false, that is correct or incorrect question. If the purpose of the audit procedure is to test for the understatement in the accounts payable, then testing the recorded accounts payable is a relevant audit procedure. We all said true. Sorry, correct. Only Pradyumna or one more person said false, incorrect, and they gave a proper reasoning. You remember? I remember. So that's relevance. It should meet the requirements of the object. It should meet the objectives of the audit. Rather, it has to hit the relevant assertion. That is relevance. Reliability means what?
Trustworthy.
Trustworthy. Whether can you rely, can you believe those evidence? So it is what? It is affected by two things.
The source of the evidence and the nature
of
of
evidence.
Very good. Source and nature. The reliability is affected by the source and nature. Source means from where these documents are emanating from. Origination of these documents. So which is highly reliable.
Externals.
Very good. Any document which the auditor collects it independently from the external sources is highly reliable. That's why we always seek to have external confirmation of balances. Correct, no? Then it follows the order. Correct, no? First, external. Evidence obtained directly by the auditor. Evidences obtained from the external sources. Evidences obtained where the auditor can corroborate with the other audit evidence. The reliability will increase. And lastly, evidences which are obtained internally, generated internally. When will you get reliability? When you are trying to verify the documents generated internally. When will the reliability be established? If you're trying to extract evidence from the documents generated internally. When the controls over its preparation is strong. Now, sale invoices, who will give? Sale invoices, who will? The auditee, the entity that you're auditing only gives sale invoices. You can't ask the vendors to give sale invoices.
Yes, sir.
Your statements, you have to give the invoices. So is the document generated internally or externally?
Internal.
You have to rely. When will you rely? You will rely when you understand the sales process. You will rely when you have confidence on the way in which the invoices are generated. So what check will you follow? One basic check that you will check. Sale invoices. Sorry? Can you please repeat? When will you say the controls are strong? One basic thing that you will check in sales.
Documents. Sales
Documents. When will you get the reliability on the documents?
Tax invoice.
Invoice, correct. Tax invoice. When will you rely on the tax invoice? What control you will always ensure in sales invoices?
Whether they are serial numbers.
Very good. Sale invoices should be serially numbered because I am generating. See, any document which I am generating should always be serially numbered. Invoice number 001, 002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sale invoices should be like that. Why? Because I am generating it. When I am generating it, it has to be serially numbered. Purchases cannot have the serially numbered invoices. If you have serially numbered invoices, then it should post questions on reliability. How can you have 001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 purchase invoices? Purchases from Rama, Krishna, Buddha, it will be different. No, they will follow a different series of invoices. How can your invoice be serially numbered? But your sale invoices should be serially numbered. Understood? So this is when the controls over the preparation are strong, then the documents which are generated internally, the reliability will increase. This is what is about reliability. Relevance and reliability is appropriate. Sufficiency is about quantity of the evidence that you collect. Then you perform the relevant audit procedures. Correct? No? So audit procedures are broadly divided into two parts. What are they?
Risk assessment procedures and further audit procedures.
Very good. Risk assessment procedures and further audit procedures. What are risk assessment procedures? No, I don't want a study material answer. Tell what you know.
Sir, is that depending on the nature. Hello.
Yes, you're audible.
The items of the financial statements are affected, and to determine the effect of the financial statements, But we have to understand the nature of the entity and its internal control.
Very good. Very good. That's risk assessment process. Audit procedures that you perform through understanding the entity and its environment to consider the possible risk factors that the entity's financial statements might be subjected to misstatements. What are all the risk factors that this entity might have which may cause the entity's financial statements to contain misstatement? This assessment is called risk assessment. How do you do it? By or through understanding the entity and its environment, including entity's internal controls. Now, what is the outcome? What is the purpose of doing risk assessment process?
To understand the nature, timing, and extent of the further audit procedures.
Perfect. To determine the nature, timing, and extent of the further audit procedures. The further audit procedures are again divided into two parts. What are they?
Test of control.
Compliance procedures, substantive procedures.
Very good. Test of controls and substantive procedures. Test of controls are also called?
Compliance.
Very good. Compliance procedures. What is the objective under test of controls?
Operating effectiveness of internal control.
Very good. To determine the operating effectiveness of the controls, whether the controls are able to do three things. What are they?
Prevent, detect, and control.
Prevent, detect, correct material misstatements on a timely basis. So what is the outcome of compliance procedure?
Nature, timing, and extent of substantive procedures.
Very good. Nature, timing, and extent of the substantive procedures. Now, what are substantive procedures? These are the audit procedures which are designed to detect the misstatements at the assertion levels. You go down, you go deeper now and try to detect the misstatements. The objective is very important. The objective is to detect misstatements. So substantive procedures are divided into two parts.
Test of
details, substantive
analytical
procedure.
Very good. Test of details and substantive analytical procedures. Test of details are further divided into two parts. What are they?
test of
transactions and
Test of balances.
Test of transactions and test of balances. Test of transactions is called
Vouching.
vouching. Test of balances is called
Verification.
verification. It simply means test of transactions means all P&L items that you do. Transaction means what? That the activity that the entity does. So the result of a transaction will be a balance. That is your balance sheet item. So test of transactions is all your P&L items. Test of balances is all your balance sheet items. You're going to go try to obtain evidence and see are there any misstatements. Substantive analytical procedures are what? They are the audit procedures performed by having a evaluation of plausible relationship between financial and non-financial data. You try to do what? Try to link or try to establish relationships between two information. One is financial, one is non-financial. Example is what? Number of employees into average salary. Number of months of occupancy into rent per month. Here you are going to do what? Trend analysis, ratio analysis, structured modelings, reasonableness analysis. During COVID times, entities' travel expenses is bound to come down. But this entity's travel expenses have gone up, which is not reasonable. Currently, considering the economic situation, the dollar rates are going up, euro rates are going up, but this entity is having imports and it is showing forex gain, which is not reasonable. Now, all the entities which have foreign exposures as payables is bound to have forex loss. Without even checking any calculations, we all know. ಗೊತ್ತಿದಲ್ವಾ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಡಾಲರ್ ರೇಟು ಹೇಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಮೇಲ್ಗಡೆ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ನಾನು ಬೈ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ 80 rupees ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದು ಇವಾಗ 88 ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿರುತ್ತೆ, 84 ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ, 82 ಇದೆ. So I am supposed to get loss, forex loss. But if this entity has reported gain, your understanding of the current economics, your understanding of the entity structure will not permit you to accept that this can be right without even checking any documents. But analytical procedures drawback is what? It is going to be evaluated at a very high level because you're taking data at a very aggregated level. So results may not be accurate. It is only going to give you just a glimpse or an overview. So this is substantive analytical procedure. Understood? So we are still at the definition part. Reasonable assurance is obtained by collecting sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Sufficient and appropriate audit evidence is collected by performing audit procedures. What are audit procedures is what we discuss now. Now, we said that audit can only provide reasonable assurance. Why? Because of inherent limitations to the audit. Now, what are the inherent limitations to the audit? Now, people have to be a bit responsive and respond to my questions. Otherwise, it becomes difficult.
So nature
What
of
are
financial
inherent
report.
limitations to the audit?
Nature of financial reporting.
Very good. Nature of financial reporting. Financial statements is not 1 + 1 = 2 because there are a lot of accounting policies which have differing accounting interpretations. There are a lot of areas where the management is required to make estimates. Management is required to exercise judgments. And that makes me to not to state that the financial statements are 100% pakka objectively, because financial statement itself is subjected to a lot of subjective items. Are you all able to understand what I'm talking, or you feel that it's nonsense?
Able to understand.
Okay, next. What is the second objective?
Nature of
audit procedure.
Nature of audit procedure. What is the explanation for this? Whatever you do, you are not doing with an investigative mindset. That's what audit differs from investigation. Nor are you given with superpowers. Mistake right? So we start with the positive mindset. We don't start with any investigative mindset, nor are we given with any superpowers to investigate into any aspects. Audit is also functioned with a lot of other constraints, which makes me extremely difficult to identify all possible misstatements. That's why we shield ourselves and state that even though the audit is planned and performed properly, there could be some misstatements which may go undetected. That is beyond anybody's control. ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿ ವ್ಯಾಕ್ಸಿನೇಷನ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ವಿ, ಮಾಸ್ಕ್ ಹಾಕೊಂಡ್ವಿ, ಮನೆಯಿಂದ ಆಚೆ ಹೋಗ್ಲೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೂ ಕೋವಿಡ್ ಬಂತು. ಯಾರ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್? ನನ್ನ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ ಬೀದಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸುತ್ತಿದ್ದಾನೆ, ಅವ್ನು ಕೋವಿಡ್ ಬರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ನಂಗೆ ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ ಕೋವಿಡ್, ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ನನ್ನ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ ಬೀದಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸುತ್ತಿದ್ದಾನೆ, ಕೋವಿಡ್ ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ. ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ದು? Beyond anybody's control, right? So you can't do anything. So that is the nature of audit procedures. Then
timeliness and balance between cost and benefit.
Very good. Timeliness and balance between cost. Audit ಎಲ್ಲ ಪರ್ಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಸರ್. ನಾನು ಏಪ್ರಿಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಆಡಿಟ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ, ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ನವೆಂಬರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಹೋಗು ಅಂತಾರೆ ಮನೆಗೆ. Because by 30th of September I should have AGM. So for that I have to have financial statement. At least 21 days I want. So by maximum 10th of September, not 10th, 9th of 8th of September, financial statement should be audited. You can't take your own sweet time. Right? Sir, ಎಲ್ಲ ಪರ್ಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಬರ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ. 8 ಸಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ 8 years ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಓದ್ತೀನಿ. ಯಾರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರ ನೀವೇನ್ ಸಾಕು ಅಂತಾರೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. 8 ಸಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ 8 ಇಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ, 8 ಗಿಂತ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ 10 or 12 ಇದೆ. 100 ವರ್ಷ ಓದ್ತೀರಾ? ರಾಮಾನೇ ವನವಾಸ ಮುಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿರ್ತೀವಿ, ನೀವು ಇಂಟರ್ ಬರ್ದಿರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. So you can't do that. Why? Because there's a time is ticking. This revision class cannot go on for eternity. It has to come to an end. That is what you're all waiting for. It will come. Now there should be a balance between benefit and cost. See, sometimes we decide to ditch the vehicle and buy a new one. Why? Because the cost of repairs is much higher than a new vehicle. So yes, I have to give reasonable assurance. This fellow is asking 1 crore as audit fee. Who will give 1 crore as audit? Nange assurance ಬೇಡ, ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ನಂಗೆ ಏನೋ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಈ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಸರಿ ಮಾಡಕ್ ಎಷ್ಟು? 5 ಕೋಟಿ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಡಾಕ್ಟ್ರೆ. 5 ಕೋಟಿ 6 ಕೋಟಿ ಆಗ್ಲಿ, ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ನಾನು ಮಾಡಿಸ್ಕೊಡಲ್ಲ ಆಪರೇಷನ್. ನಾನೇ 5 ಕೋಟಿ ಕೊಟ್ರೆ ನಾನೇ ಇರಲ್ಲ, ಆಪರೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡಿಸ್ಕೊಡಿ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿ? ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್. ಅಂತ ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಸೋ ಹೈ, ಬೆನಿಫಿಟ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಯವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಅಯ್ಯೋ 5 ಕೋಟಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇನು ಬರ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಬಿಡಿ ಸರ್, ನಾವ್ ಹೆಂಗೋ ಮ್ಯಾನೇಜ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋತೀವಿ, ಇರೋ ದಿನ ಇರ್ಲಿ. ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್? ನೋ, you understood? No, what is the benefit that you get? You people also, if I come and ask all my fellow friends, we have gathered here to collect fund for Aarti ma'am is arranging a campaign. Friends, we are gathered here to contribute to Siddarth for his ailment, 5 crores. You all will come to a unanimous decision. The benefit is much lesser than the cost. Please go. This is not going to be of any use. Correct? No, so you should always ensure that what audit comes with the cost, that cost should always be lesser than the benefit that you get. So that is the reason why you can't. That means what? You can't go and try to obtain evidence by engaging all experts.
You can't afford to do it, right? Management will say, thank you, we will change the auditor only. So that's not going to happen. And lastly, what is the other limitation?
Other matters.
The
Matters.
matters that affect
This is very
limitation for
important. See, in BCom or in any other exam, others is very easy. But in CA, others is very difficult because you have to write only specific answers. What are others?
Fraud.
fraud that is
You're not telling me that I'm fraud. Suddenly, if
No.
someone says fraud, I always have the feeling that you are addressing me. Okay,
Related party.
very good. Related parties.
Going concern.
non-compliance with the laws. Non-compliance with the laws.
And regulations. Very good.
Future
See,
events.
people should come out of answering a word. You people don't even extend to phrase. No, you should not say fraud. Other matters. What is that other matters? There are certain areas where auditors' ability to detect the misstatement is limited. You will need to remember it like this only. There are certain subject matters or assertions where the auditor's ability to detect the misstatement is limited. Why? Because in exam they will ask, give the statement and ask you to explain the reason why it is so. So if you don't know that this other matters have these points are the reasons for the previously said ones, you can't answer. You understood what I'm trying to say? So first is what? The fraud. Any activity related to fraud, especially fraud involving collusion, your ability to detect misstatements will be limited. Second, existence and completeness of all related party transactions. You may identify related party, but completeness, is it in your hands? No, it goes beyond auditor's control. Then, compliance with the possibilities of non-compliance with laws and regulations. There could be so many laws and regulations that you may not even know it, that could be there. How will you obtain evidence that the entities comply with all laws and regulations? There are so many labor laws, there are so many environmental laws, there are so many chemical related laws that are there. We may not know. Now, income tax ಕಷ್ಟಪಟ್ಟು ಕಲ್ತಿರ್ತೀವಿ ಅದರಲ್ಲೇ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಉಲ್ಟಾ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತೀವಿ ನಾವು, right? So it is very difficult to obtain evidence. And lastly, the entity's ability to continue as a going concern. I cannot sit and decide whether the entity is a going concern or not. Only based on the financial parameters, I can only decide whether the entity has any material uncertainty. But whether the going concern itself is there or not, very difficult for me to obtain the evidence. You all agree with me? You have no option but to agree with me because that is what standards say. So this is very important. So these are all the inherent limitations to the audit. Understood?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Board already.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Got it. Now, in the whole process of audit, you need to exercise professional skepticism. What is skepticism?
Questioning mind. Questioning mind.
Very good. Having questioning mindset. Now, because you are evaluating the evidence, you need to consider what are all the possible factors that might be there here, which might cause this entity to have misstatements. That is what is professional skepticism. If I say that 2 plus 2 is equal to 8, your mind should say, no, it's not so. Why? Because you're thinking. Like if I say reasonable audit gives negative assurance or audit gives limited assurance, you say yes, because for you it's only sound. Sound travels in line, air. For you it's just like that, any other sound like this. So it doesn't make any sense to you. But if you are thinking, your mind, well, audit gives reasonable assurance. Why is he saying limited assurance? The thought process should be there first. Then you will answer. Correct? No. So that is what is professional skepticism. What are the examples where the auditors exercise professional skepticism? Very important, this area.
Contradicting with the other evidence that has been obtained.
Very good. Audit evidence contradicts the other audit evidence obtained. External confirmation balance says amount receivable as 100. Your books of account says 1000. So there is a contradicting evidence. Then
conditions that may indicate the possibility of fraud.
Conditions that may indicate the possibility of fraud. Nan bandi takshana ella alert adri. Oh, bandappa evanu demands hakbeki ivaga anta. So that indicates that you should be active. So if you identify, if you smell a rat, then you should be very, very active. Then
omission of observing the unusual circumstances.
Overlooking unusual circumstances. This professional skepticism helps you to overlook unusual possibility of overlooking unusual circumstances. Very good.
Conditions where we have to perform additional procedures than the normal.
Very good. Conditions that requires the auditor to perform procedures beyond what is required in essays. Because the circumstances,
ಬರೀ essay 505 ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋದು ಮಾತ್ರ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಇನ್ನು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಾ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ನಾನು. ಯಾಕೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು? There could be something which is wrong. So your mind should be active. And if there are any situations that brings into question the reliability of the audit evidence, then the auditor should be alert. Now, auditor is trying to verify existence assertion, rights and obligations assertion of a PPE. What he should verify? Land. An entity has a land. How do you verify rights of assertion?
Sir, may the document of ownership.
Agreement.
Title deeds. You will verify title deeds. Now the entity is giving photocopy. The Xerox is what they're giving. Now you are asking
For the
originals.
original.
They're saying, sir, originals are lost. Then can you rely on this photocopied ones?
No.
No,
You
sir.
start thinking, why did you lose? Okay, give me the FIR copy that you have filed, lodged with the police. Sir, we didn't do anything of that sort. How can you be so silent when you have lost the original title deeds of the property? I cannot rely on the photocopied ones. Again, it goes back to the reliability concept again. In all these cases, you have to exercise professional skepticism. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
This is important. Next, in your what are the fundamental principles to professional ethics?
Objectivity.
Objectivity.
Integrity.
Integrity.
Professional behavior.
Professional behavior. Behave yourself properly. That's what she's telling. Next.
Professional
Confidentiality.
Confidentiality. Very good.
due care and diligence.
Competence and
Professional competence and due care. That means you should be competent enough. Now laws are changing, standards are. Taro 2016 ಓದ್ಕೊಂಡು ಕೂತಿರಕ್ಕಾಗತ್ತ ನಾನು just because I read Taro 2016 for my examinations. I have to keep myself updated with Taro 2020. The Taro 2022 ಬಂದ್ರೆ Taro 2022 ಓದ್ಕೊಂಡಿರ್ಬೇಕು. Standards on auditing change ಆಗಿದ್ರೆ I have to read standards on auditing which is new. So I have to keep myself updated, abreast with all the latest developments. Otherwise, they will throw me out. ನಿಮ್ಗೇನು ಬರೋದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಯಾವ್ದೋ ತಾತ್ರಾಯನ್ ಕಾಲನ್ ಕೂತಿದ್ದಾನೆ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಂತಾರೆ. ರೈಟ್. 1986 ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ಕಮ್ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಲಾ ಹಂಗಿತ್ತು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸರಿ, ಹೂ ಇಸ್ ಇಂಟ್ರೆಸ್ಟೆಡ್? 2022 ಬಜೆಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಯ್ತು ಹೇಳಪ್ಪ ಅಂತ ಕೇಳೋದು ಇಂಟ್ರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಇರೋದು ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ನೋ? ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ದೀಸ್ ಆರ್ ಆಲ್ ದಿ ಫಂಡಮೆಂಟಲ್ ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸಿಪಲ್ಸ್ ಟು ಪ್ರೊಫೆಷನಲ್ ಎಥಿಕ್ಸ್. ನೌ ಇಫ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ಟಾಕಿಂಗ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ಅ ಫರ್ಮ್, ನೌ ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಮನ್ ಫಾರ್ ಆಲ್ ದೀಸ್ 4 ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡರ್ಡ್ಸ್, SAS, SREs, SAEs, SRS? What is common? ಎಲ್ಲ ಮರ್ತೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀರಾ ನೀವು, ಫಾರ್ಮ್ಯಾಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಬ್ರೈನ್ ನ. ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಮನ್ ಫಾರ್ SAS, SREs, SAEs, SRS? SA ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಡಿ, ಎಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಡಿ. ಲೆಟರ್ S is common everywhere. Sir, analytical thinking, no? What is common? Quality should be common. So you need to follow standards on quality, right? So SQC1. Hello?
Yes, sir.
My name is Siddarth. I am coming from Bangalore, and we are here. We are gathered in. So this speech always reminds me of my school days. We are gathered. Good morning. Everybody knows that it's for a Republic Day. We are gathered here to celebrate the Republic Day. 1947 independence. I hate it because Jawaharlal Nehru's famous speech was there. I used to always take, and I was supposed to read those quote. India is like a water. Something was there. Who is interested like that? So I am here to discuss auditing. Are you all awake?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Auditing lecture only, no?
yes.
Your mind is
Sir,
not
auditing, sir.
registered. Why? SQC1 ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡೋದು? SQC1, standards on quality control, expects the entity to have some firm procedures. What are they? What are the firm's quality control procedures should comprise of? You're causing me a lot of ailments, these damages to my heart. It has to somehow have to heal. It has to heal. Time only will heal. Heal me, please. Heal me only. Heal me. Human resources. E talks for what? Ethical requirements. A talks for what? Acceptance of client and continuance. L talks about what? L talks about
Leadership.
Leadership that you don't carry. Then M talks about monitoring the activities. E talks about
Engagement performance.
Engagement.
engagement performance.
Please heal me, for God's sake. To heal me, you will get answer. Firms, quality control practices, leadership. See, reading only these points are not enough. You have to know. But you people don't even know these points. What is this? Please read properly. Next. Now, whatever it is a binding agreement between. Am I going too fast or too slow?
No, sir.
No, sir. No, sir.
These were not discussed at all in the class, not even once.
It was just.
It was discussed and you have comfortably forgotten. Correct, no? Okay. Now, when we talk about an engagement, an audit, there should be a binding relationship, no? So how does it come? How does it come?
Audit engagement.
Very good. Audit engagement letter. Agreeing to the terms of audit engagement. So you need to agree. What will you agree? When will you agree to take an audit? Okay, I'll ask the question and I'll only answer. Siddarth, when will you decide to take an engagement, audit engagement? Sir, I will tell the answer. Sir, it will be taken when the preconditions for an audit are present. Very good, Siddarth. What are preconditions for an audit? Preconditions for an audit are two things, sir. One is what? Sir, I will only answer. Sir, me. Okay, tell me, Siddarth. Preconditions. The first is premise, sir. Very good. Second one is what? Second one is that the financial statements are prepared in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. Very good. What is premise? What is premise?
Certain assumptions.
Assumption.
That
Assumption. There is no assumption. Premise is the foundation base. What are preconditions for an audit? What is a premise?
Sir, the auditor will be provided with all additional information whenever required, and he will not be restricted to any person who wants to obtain the audit evidence. And the management will provide all the evidence.
Okay. First and foremost, on what basis will you do the audit? You will audit what?
All controls.
Financial statements are prepared accordance with the AFRF.
But who should prepare first?
by the
Auditors
management.
are required to prepare, is it?
Management.
Management.
The precondition, no. If audit management is asking you to prepare, will you accept as an engagement?
No, sir.
The first condition is the preparation and the presentation of financial statements, the responsibility of the management. That is the first premise on the basis of which we'll perform the audit. No, what is wrong with you people? You're able to remember all these things. Preconditions for audit is something which is very, very fundamental. Correct? No.
Yes, sir.
What? Management is responsible for the implementation of the internal controls that comes as part of the preparation of the financial statements in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. And the management acknowledges that this is their responsibility. And they also agree to provide auditors with what? Unrestricted access to all those people within the entity from whom auditors consider it necessary to obtain the information. Auditors are provided with access to all the records, documents that are related for the purpose of his audit. And on the basis of which only you would perform the audit. Correct? No?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Next. That is the premise and the preconditions for an audit. This is very important. Now, we have also discussed in an engagement letter, if a law or a regulation prescribes in detail the terms of the engagement, are we required to maintain an engagement letter replicating all those things?
No.
Then what are we supposed to do?
That particular law applies, regulation applies.
Just mention the fact that this law or a regulation applies. Now, in the case of recurring audits, what is the requirement of engagement letter? Should we have to draft it every year and get it signed?
No, sir.
No,
Not every year. Just once in 3 years, if there is any update.
At least once in 3 years, you need to update your engagement letter. And very importantly, when is it required for you to change? When the management has misunderstood the scope and the objective of audit. When there's a change in the senior ownership or the people who were the parties to the engagement letter and they have changed now, and when
the circumstances itself is changed, or when there is a change in the applicable financial reporting framework. In these situations, you need not wait, you should not wait, and you have to revise the engagement letter. Understood?
Yes, sir.
So that's what it is. This is coming in your essay 210. Now, if the management is limiting your scope, what is it called?
Limitation on scope.
Limitation on scope. How are you going to deal with limitation on scope? 2 arrow marks. First one, before accepting an engagement and after accepting an engagement. Before accepting an engagement itself, management is imposing restrictions on your scope. How are you going to deal?
Understand the implications.
Very good. You need to understand the implications on your audit. And then what will you do?
Discuss with the management.
Discuss it with the management, and where appropriate, those charged with governance. And if such a limitation is drawing you to give a disclaimer of opinion, you shall not accept such an engagement. You should not accept only when the limitation of scope is imposed prior to the acceptance. Now the limitation on scope is imposed post acceptance. What will you do? Same things. Consider the reasons for such a limitation. Identify, are there any reasonable justification from the management to do so? Then evaluate the implications on your audit. Discuss it with those charged with governance and management. Unless prohibited by a law or a regulation, or unless it is impracticable for you to do so, withdraw from the engagement. If you are drawing or inclining towards giving a disclaimer of opinion, such an engagement is not a good engagement unless you are required by law or regulation. There is no option for you to exit. Then you have to disclaim yourself from giving the opinion, or you have to qualify or provide adverse opinion. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
This is what is covered in your essay 510. Now, what is important difference between audit and a review? What is the difference? Is there a difference between an audit and a review? Engagement. This is important.
Yes, sir.
What is the difference?
Limited assurance and reasonable assurance.
Audit is reasonable assurance. Review is limited assurance. Very good. In an audit, you are going to use the word true and fair view, or is prepared in all material respects depending upon compliance or framework. But in a review, you're not supposed to use the word true and fair view, because your opinion is given in a negative format. Nothing has come to my attention that causes me to believe that the financial statements contain misstatement. A review is performed normally for the financial statements prepared for a year, whereas a review can be for a period less than a year, less than a financial year. You will not give an audit opinion normally for a period beyond. Normally it will not be for less than a year. A review is normally given for a period less than a year. You can't give it for more than or for a year. Just for less than a year itself. It is all the quarterly reviews that we see. So then audit and investigation difference is important. Audit is positive mindset. Investigation is negative mindset. Audit gives only reasonable assurance. Investigation gives conclusive opinion on a fact. The ultimate outcome of an investigation is whether Skanda is culprit or not. I will not say to the best of my knowledge and according to the information and explanation given, I am of the view that Skanda may be a culprit. What is the opinion? What did you do? It's not the case. Right? And an audit is conducted on the financial statements, whereas investigation goes beyond areas of finance. Investigation can be in any area. Right? An audit should be conducted only by a chartered accountant, but an investigation can be conducted by anybody. Audit is for the financial year. Investigation may not be for a financial year. It may be for a less than a financial year period or for a period beyond 1 year. Right? So there's no specific time. Correct? No? And the reporting authorities are different in an audit and investigation.
Investigation is normally triggered by a regulatory authority, whereas audit is given to give assurance to the members. Correct, no? So these are the differences between audit and investigation. Then we'll come to company audit a little later. So with this, we complete all the basics and I know I've not completely touched the basics because Asha ma'am is going to cover a few concepts which are being handled. Then we move to important area called audit evidence. Again, audit evidence, relevance, reliability concepts are very, very crucial. Now, there are few points in audit evidence that requires your attention. Which are there? There are some points. There is nothing mysterious about audit evidence. Everything is a simple and a straightforward information. Audit evidence varies in reliability. Correct. Now, when the auditor obtains the evidence from the external sources, it will be more reliable. So all those points are important. Next, in order to, when we perform the audit procedures, we use certain techniques. These are called audit techniques. Those study material uses the word procedures. We have understood it as what? Audit techniques. When you are performing audit procedures, you are going to use audit techniques. What are the examples of audit techniques?
Observation.
Inquiry.
Inspection, observation,
Inspection, recalculation,
Performance.
external confirmation,
inquiry.
inquiries. Okay, analytical procedures, we didn't use it, though it is there. We didn't tell that it is a technique because it's a procedure. Now, inquiry. Inquiry is one of the most important audit techniques that you do. What will you do in inquiry?
Get information from the management, maybe, or any other.
Asking questions. Asking questions to the management or those people whom auditor considers it necessary, and evaluating responses to inquiry is the integral part of the inquiry process. Inquiry is highly efficient but least effective. It takes lesser time and resources, but it may not be helpful in the court of law because tomorrow you may slip and say, no, I didn't tell. Inquiries will have to be used to corroborate the evidence that the auditor collects it from the other sources. Management is saying something, you validate by collecting evidence at different source. So that's what you are going to do in inquiries. Then inspection. When will you use inspection? When is
With regard to the
Examining the records.
Very good. Inspection is connected when you are examining the documents, records, inspecting the inventory records, inspecting the property, plant and equipment register. So that is what is covered under inspection. Normally, inspection is used in test of controls because you want to validate by understanding the entity's flow charts, entity's narrative records, right? So that is inspection. Observation.
Observing how the process is taking place or performed.
Very good. Observation is a procedure which is used to understand whether looking at a particular process or a procedure, whether it is being followed properly. What is a classic example? Inventory verification. You're going to observe what management's process of counting. How are they dealing with those differences? So that's about observation. Then recomputation. You're going to recompute it again as to what the entity has already done. Normally, recomputation is used for
Depreciation,
interest calculations,
mathematical accuracy, arithmetical accuracy, recomputation or reperformance. Then reperformance. Reperformance is what?
Performing something which was already done, like by the internal controls.
By the internal controls, very good. To validate whether the internal controls are doing it properly. Example, BRS is being carried out by the entity. You take for a random month and you are going to perform the bank reconciliation statement and see whether it is going to tally or not. So that is reperformance. Correct, no? So
So even in the inventory verification, it is not your responsibility to count. What you do on a test basis, test check basis, you take some samples and you do the counting process. So that is what re-performance. This is not observation. You are observing how management is doing. You are only physically doing it. So that is re-performance. So all these techniques will be used. A combination of these techniques will be used in the process of the audit. Now, compliance procedure, is it mandatory?
No.
No. When is it mandatory?
When substantive
when
procedures are not sufficient.
Not mandatory, then that means it's a choice. So when will you exercise? When will you decide that you would want to do compliance procedure?
Substantive procedures are not sufficient.
Very good. When substantive procedures alone do not provide sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, example is what Amazon, Big Bazaar. When you're auditing that, you can't really completely check the documents and then come to a reasonable assurance. You have to invariably rely on controls. Examples is a bank. In a bank, you have to rely on controls. Otherwise, you cannot complete the audit. Then, when the auditor's risk assessment takes into consideration that the internal controls are working, internal controls are effective, and the auditor intends to rely on those controls. In that case, auditor would perform test of controls. You're able to understand?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
It's not compulsory for you to perform test of controls. But when will you do it? When substantive procedures are not sufficient, when your risk assessment takes into account that there are internal controls and these internal controls are working properly. That means what you want to rely on them. If you have to rely on them, what you should test whether they are proper or not. Correct, no? In these cases, you are going to perform test of controls. Now, if you decide to perform the test of controls, the extent and the frequency of the controls are dependent on certain factors. What are they? The frequency of the controls of the entity, of the controls in the entity, whether this control is functioning throughout the period or whether this control be effective only at a particular period. For example, entity has disaster recovery plans. Now, this disaster recovery controls will not be functioning throughout the period. It will be there. It will be functional only when the disaster takes place, when the outbreak happens. Correct, no? But for example, safeguarding the assets, reliable financial reporting, these controls will be there throughout the period and it will be functioning throughout the year. So that controls you will test more. For example, there are some internal controls with respect to physical verification. When the entity, are you all able to understand? When the management is performing physical verification, there will be a halt in the movement of goods. That's the control. They will not allow any goods to come in, nor will they allow any goods to go out. They will stop the production process. Now, these controls will not be there throughout the period. It will be there only when you are performing physical verification. Understood?
Yes.
And the length of time during the audit period, the auditor is relying. Whether the auditor wants to rely these controls throughout the period or is he required to rely on these controls only at a particular point is what will determine. Then expected rate of deviation. Now the auditor expects that there are controls, but the controls deviate a lot. Then auditor cannot rely on those controls. The auditor's expected rate of deviation is higher. Test of controls performance will be higher or lower?
Lower.
Lower?
Higher.
Higher or lower? You understood the question? If the expected rate of deviation is higher, the auditor will perform more testing or lesser testing?
More.
testing.
We would want to take more and more evidence, connect it to sampling chapter. Understood?
when the expected rate of deviation impacts to what extent you want to test. If you expect that the auditing paper will be difficult, will you read less or will you read more? Sir, stop.
More.
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 The question has indifferent answer. Whether the paper is difficult or easy, I will read how I want to read. Correct. No, you will read more. Theoretically, you should read more. Correct. No, same way. Then the relevance and the reliability that you have obtained previously. Now, for control testing, what is the requirement? It may not be tested every year, but testing these controls at least once in how many years?
Yes.
Once in 3 years is expected. Correct? No? Correct. No. So if you have conducted test of controls very recently, that is the last year, you may do lesser control testing this time. If you have conducted control testing 2 years ago, now you will test more and more because things would have changed. Circumstances might have changed. Correct. No. And lastly, the extent of evidence that you want to obtain from these controls. The nature of evidence that you are trying to obtain at this particular assertion is important. Now, if you intend to rely on some other aspects, then this control testing will be reduced or restricted. Understood? So this is what. Then, if you decide to use the evidences that you have obtained in the past, that means last year you performed the control testing, this year you want to rely on those controls. What are the factors that will affect? The factors will be what? Effectiveness of the components of internal controls. What are the components of internal controls? Please have some mercy and answer. Show some mercy.
Monitoring.
Very good. Mercy. MERCI. Monitoring controls. Entities, control environment, risk assessment process. Then MERC. Control and activities. Correct. And lastly, information systems. Control environment, attitudes, awareness, actions of the entity. Controls illide. Controls. ಇವಾಗ ಡಿಸ್ಕೋ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೀವಿ ನಾವು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಾ ಭರತನಾಟ್ಯ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಅಥವಾ ಕ್ಲಾಸಿಕಲ್ ಸಾಂಗ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಆಚೆಗೆ ಹೋಗು ಅಂತಾರೆ. ಅಥವಾ ಯಾವ್ದೋ ಒಂದು ಕ್ಲಾಸಿಕಲ್ ಶೋಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ್ದೋ ತರ ಹಾಡು ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ರಿಮ್ಯಾನ್ಸ್ ಹಾಕು ಅಂತಾರೆ. ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್? ನೋ, ಯಾವ ಎನ್ವೈರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ ನೀವು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. It's your wedding day. Can you wear shorts and go? Nobody is saying you can't wear shorts, but will you go? No, your wedding only. I can come in shorts. People will judge, but you can't sit in shorts and tie the knot. Correct? No, there is some process that you have to follow, or you have to go, whatever be your the practices, because the environment where you are matters a lot. Right? Library kutkond nan joragi ottini andre aache hogu anತಾರೆ. Correct? No. So the environment where the controls will be implemented is extremely important. What does it include? It includes those charged with governance attitudes, their actions, their awareness, their integrity, their honesty, their participation. All those things form part of your control environment. Control activities means what? This is one of the important component of internal control. Can you give an example of control activity? Watch, prevent, detect, correct misstatement is control activity. What step? ಈ ಕೋಲ್ ಹಿಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬರ್ತೀನಿ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ಗೆ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡರ್ಡ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಇವಾಗೆಲ್ಲ ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಡಿ. ಕೋಲ್ ತಗೊಂಡು ಟೀಚರ್ಗೆ ಕೋಲ್ ಕಳ್ಸಿಬಿಡ್ತಾರೆ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್. ನಾವು ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿರುವಾಗ ಏನ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಇತ್ತು ಟೀಚರ್ಸ್ ಹತ್ರ? ಒಂದ್ ಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಇರ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ಓ ಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಸುಮ್ನೆ ಕೂತ್ಕೋಬೇಕು, ಇಲ್ಲಾಂದ್ರೆ ಹೇಳೋರು ಆ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಪೊಲೀಸ್ಕೊಂಬ ಅಂತ. ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್? ನೋ, ಅದು ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು. ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಆಕ್ಟಿವಿಟಿ. ಲೈಕ್ ದಟ್, ವಾಟ್ ಆರ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಆಕ್ಟಿವಿಟೀಸ್? Can you give an example? Sir, I will answer. Siddarth, you're only answering. Please give chance to others. Others, please answer. Control activity. What is this? Segregation of duty. Maker, checker. What is segregation of duty? Work done by one person should be reviewed by another. Segregation of incompatible duties. One work should be performed by two different people based on their roles. It's a control activity. Maker, checker. Work done by one person will always come under the purview of another person. Authorizations. Yes. Physical controls itself is an example, no?
IT related controls that you implement, password policy, access security, having a CCTV is a control. Why? Because it safeguards the assets. Jewelry shop example kotti now. Right? These are all the control activities. Entities risk assessment process. Bank audit allu ಮಾಡಿದೀನಿ oversight of those charged with governance. What are the risk management process? Our ICMR is very great. Oversight of those charged with governance, identification of risk, monitoring the risk, measuring the risk. ಎಲ್ಲ ಓದಿದ್ದೀನಿ ನಿಮ್ದು risk IT ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತಾನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೆ ನಾಪ್ಕ ಇದೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ. So entities risk assessment process, do they have systems in place to assess the risk? How are they identifying the risk? How are they managing these risks? That is important. Entities information system. Today, world is moving with the fuel of information, right? So how the entities information systems are there in place. This covers all your IT related activities, IT dependent controls, general controls, application controls, all of them come under this information systems. And lastly, what is it? What it is monitoring. If you don't monitor your activity, for sure it will go for toss. ಮನೇಲಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ದಿನ ಓದ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಅಟ್ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ಒಂದ್ ಸತಿನಾದ್ರು ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ನಿಮ್ನ, ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀರಾ ಟ್ರ್ಯಾಕ್ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಆಚೆ ನೀವು, ರೈಟ್? So monitoring is very, very crucial. So these are all the components of internal controls. So what we'll be discussing, if you decide to rely on the evidence that are obtained previously, what are the things that you should keep in your mind? Effectiveness of the other components of internal controls. Are there any changes in the circumstances? Have the when I did the audit the last year, the entity was having high gap. Now it is moved to Ind AS. Circumstances have changed. Can I use the evidence that I have obtained previously? I will question. Entity has moved from existing law to GST era. There will be structural changes required. So what is it? Business models have been changed. Law and regulations have changed. So what is it that we have to do? Are there any changes in the circumstances? What are the risks that are arising from the IT that you have implemented? Systems are not processing the entries properly. Debit, credit, ಎಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ ತರ ಪಾಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ನಮ್ ತರ ಪಾಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ದೋದು ಇಂಪ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ನಮ್ ತರನೇ ಪಾಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. This is a risk that we carry, right? And the effectiveness of IT general controls. And whether there is a change, whether these controls have been changed according to the changing requirements. Understood? Hey, why are you so sad? What happened? What did I do?
Not sad, sir.
You want a break? Break from me is essential, I know, but it's not possible. You want a break? You tell me if you want a break, we'll break. No, that also, what you're asked not to talk in a session? Then
Either way is fine.
Sir,
Either way is fine.
Anything is fine because we will be indifferent. In costing, I don't know which concept you have learned. You have learned indifference concept properly. Whatever happens, whatever you do, we are like this. You do whatever you want, man. Hey, you do, man. Hey, you do whatever you want and the you. ಏನೇ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ನೀವು ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನತ್ತೆ. ನಾನು ಡ್ಯಾನ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಹಿಂಗೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ರೆಷನ್, ಹಾಡ್ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಹಿಂಗೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ರೆಷನ್, ಆಡಿಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಹಿಂಗೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ರೆಷನ್. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, the risk of misstatement and the extent of reliance. What is it that we are discussing? If you are relying on the evidence which is obtained previously, what are the factors? Understood?
Yes, sir.
Now, irrespective of your assessment of risk of material misstatement, substantive procedures should be conducted. Correct or incorrect?
So could you repeat?
Irrespective of auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement, substantive procedures are to be conducted. Correct or incorrect?
Correct.
Correct.
Why? 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 Because yes, Harshita.
Sir, because risk of material misstatements, when we check it, we do it on a very broad level, and our aim is to detect material misstatements, which is why we have been called to audit the financial statements of the entity.
Perfect. So perfect. That is the right point. What is it? Risk assessment process itself is judgmental. The way you perform risk assessment process will be different from the way I perform risk assessment process. Just by doing that, I can't say no, this finance is the INT na. Illella mistakes are perfect. Let me give unmodified opinion. You have to go. You have to check. You have to obtain evidence. Only then you can tell. Correct, no? So what is the reason? The reason is auditors risk assessment is judgmental. So it may not detect and identify all misstatements. First point. Second point, internal controls. There are limitations to inherent. There are inherent limitations to internal controls. So you cannot completely rely on internal controls. What is the classic example? Management overhead of controls. So that's one of the reasons why you can't completely rely on internal controls. And also you decide whether substantive procedures, substantive analytical procedures are more relevant, or test of details are more relevant, or a combination of any of these becomes more relevant. This is the reason. Understood? Clear?
Yes, sir.
Then move to understand one of the most important audit techniques that we do, which is external confirmation, because the reliability is highest. Now, there are two types of external confirmation. What are they? Fast, we are going very slow. Fast. Two types of confirmation.
Right.
Positive confirmation. Negative confirmation.
Correct. Hey, this is revision class, not auditing class. This is revision. Positive confirmation, negative confirmation. Basics only. What is a positive confirmation?
So we ask the party whether they agree or not. In both cases,
Creditors.
they have to reply.
Very good. The response from the confirming party is expected irrespective of whether he agrees to the balance or otherwise. What is a negative confirmation then?
If he don't agree, only then he has to reply.
A negative confirmation is a form of a request where the confirming party is expected to respond only when he disagrees with the balances or disagrees with the information which is required to be confirmed. So there is one concept called non-response. When is it applicable? Non-response is used in which context?
Sir, either that the confirmation what we sent is not delivered, or
In which form of confirmation non-response will be existing?
Positive.
negative.
Negative.
Positive.
Why is there a confusion? Non-response is always used in the context of a positive confirmation. See, if I say you please confirm only if you disagree. If you don't reply, what do I understand? I understand that it is agreed. Right? So a non-response word, there is no room for non-response in a negative confirmation. Non-response is used in the context of a positive confirmation where the confirming party fails to respond to your request. Now, what is an exception? What is an exception? Very simple. Exception is what the difference between what the confirming party has confirmed and what is the balance or what is the intended confirmation subject that you are expecting. Our account, our records show that I have to receive 5 lakh rupees from Anaga. Now, if Anaga confirms that she has to pay 4 lakhs, this is what? Difference. This difference is called exception. Understood? Now, what is the difference? Now, which is more risky? Which type of confirmation request is more risky?
Negative.
Negative confirmation is more risky. So when the auditor decides to perform confirmation as a negative confirmation, what are the aspects that he is to take into consideration?
Maybe the importance of the information that he wants a confirmation for.
Okay. when the risk of material misstatement is higher, do you decide to do negative confirmation?
No, sir.
No,
No, sir.
No. So negative confirmation is used when the auditors assess the risk of material misstatement is lower. Small balances, I would use negative confirmation. Even if they don't respond, I have no problem because I'm taking care of the major items properly. Next. When you expect the lower exception rate, if you expect you have already performed subsequent realization procedures. 31st March, there was 15,000 rupees receivable. April 20th, they have already paid. You already know it. So it's proper. But even when additionally you want to do another audit procedure, you then can decide to send out negative confirmation when lower exception rate is expected. And the fact that these confirmation requests will not be responded. If that is the case, will you send out negative confirmation? No, right? So you are not aware of any situation which makes you to believe that the confirming party will not respond. Confirming party in all cases will respond. If you are confident with that, only then you use negative confirmation. And when the auditor is deciding to obtain evidence through other means and techniques, he don't want to rely on external confirmation more. He wants to rely on something else. He wants to rely on reconstruction of the ledger balances and see whether it is proper. He wants to perform subsequent realization procedures. Then he is not relying more on external confirmation. You are all able to understand. Then the auditors will decide to do negative confirmation. This is important from the exam perspective. Please read. When the auditor decides to perform negative confirmation, he carries risk. What are the factors that he takes into consideration when he decides to perform negative confirmation requests? These points you should write. Now, auditor is performing how does the external confirmation work? It's a tri-party relationship. There's a client, that is the auditee, there's auditor, and the confirming party. The client is required to send a confirmation request to the confirming party to confirm the balances directly to the auditor. So there should be a direct transfer of information from the confirming party to the auditor. That's how it should work. Understood? Now, what happens if the management is refusing to send out confirmation requests?
There may possibility of fraud.
Possibility of fraud, okay.
We will ask the management why.
Why? Very good.
Reasons.
Very good. Understand the reasons for such a refusal. First, auditor should evaluate and understand the reasons for such a refusal to send a confirmation request. Let's say there is a dispute going on. Now I can't send it, sir. They will not respond and it is going to cause a lot of problems. Please don't send it. So the reason might be justifiable. Understand the reasons for such the refusal. Check whether those reasons are justifiable. Obtain evidence for such justification. Second point.
What are its implications?
Very good. Consider or evaluate the implications on your audit, including nature, timing, and extent of the other audit procedures. What happens if I don't get this confirmation? Auditor should evaluate. And he's also required to do what? Think about what? Very good. Auditor should determine whether any alternative audit procedures can be performed and obtain evidence. If not, then auditor is required to modify his opinion, consider the modification in accordance with SA 706. 705. Understood? So this is what the auditor should evaluate. Alternative audit procedures means what? Subsequent realization procedures. Checking the closing balance, working back to see whether the closing balance is proper. That's all. Those are all the areas which come under alternative audit procedures. Now, when you're deciding to design the confirmation request. What are the factors that you need to keep in mind? Layout and the presentation, how your confirmation request is crafted, what is the letter, how it is worded, what are the assertions that you are trying to address, what is the assessed risk of material misstatement. You need to first consider what is the risk of material misstatement that it is subjected to. What assertions are you addressing? Normally confirmation is used to address which assertion?
Account balance.
Very good, account balance, but it is not always the case. External confirmations can also be used to validate certain other assertions, to confirm the non-existence of certain transactions. Apart from this transaction, that there is no transaction, you may take the confirmation from the third party. So this is not a balance, this is a condition, right? So you're trying to take a confirmation from the entity's legal counsel that apart from the disclosed items, there are no pending or ongoing litigations. You're not confirming any balance here, right? So what are you trying to get the confirmation? The method of communication, is it email, is it through post, or is it hand delivery? The hand delivery nobody is going to do. Then the ability of the intended party, based on your experience, past experience with the entity, will these third parties confirm? I should be prepared. Out of the 80 debtors that I'm sending out the request, around 20 debtors may not confirm. I know because I've been doing the audit for the past 5 years. I know the entities is what you're telling. So this is going to be important when you're deciding the confirmation request. And lastly, if it's a related party transaction, related party, please be very careful. Then you have to evaluate the integrity of the confirming party. All these factors you will keep in your mind. And as integral part of your confirmation process will be what? The process will be to do follow-up. Follow up with the client or the third party to confirm. So that's important under your external confirmation. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then we move to understand the next chapter, which is fraud. See, I'm trying to see the whole purpose of this revision session is to make you run through all the broad principles and concepts. Here and there, I would be explaining some specifics which you might ignore. That's what I'm doing. So you can't expect me to go through each and every chapter, make you again read few points and all. It's not possible because first of all, this much only is taking a lot of my time. Correct? If you see, we're in just chapter 3 to go through a lot of other chapters. So I hope you understand how it is. See, the objective should be very clear. Otherwise, your expectation will be different. Now, let's move to fraud. This is a very important chapter, fraud and auditor's responsibility. What is fraud? Any activity which is done to gain illegal or unjust advantage is called fraud. Now, what type of frauds are we interested in? Frauds affecting financial statements. Right? Now, the frauds are broadly of two types. What are they?
Fraudulent financial reporting and misappropriation of assets.
Very good. Fraudulent financial reporting and misappropriation of assets. Fraudulent financial reporting is normally done at the senior level, done by the senior management, which normally involves override of controls. Management would override the controls and perpetrate the fraud. What are the means through which they override controls and perpetrate fraud? Bangalore example. Bangalore is full of traffic. Very good. What is it? Engaging in complex transactions, passing fictitious entries, especially at the end of the year, altering records, inappropriately adjusting assumptions, engaging in complex transactions. And then did we miss out anything? Altering the records, concealing or not disclosing the facts. Through all these means, management override control and fraudulently report the financial statements. Fraudulent financial reporting is often accompanied by three things. What is it? MMI.
Manipulation,
misrepresentation, intentional misapplication of accounting principles, manipulation, alteration of records. misrepresentation of facts and information, not disclosing the information properly, intentional misapplication of accounting principles. We know that FIFO gives the higher stock numbers valuation, upward valuation. So if I have to disclose more profit, adopt FIFO. If not, weighted average. So that's when I use these accounting principles to favor me. Then misappropriation of assets is often accompanied by the employees relatively at the smaller amounts, and it is normally perpetrated through improper authorizations, without authorizations. I'm not allowed to go to this room. I will go and then take some records and then leak it. I'm going to the server, trying to destroy. I'm going to the warehousing dispatch section, taking the goods and coming back. All of them is the example. Now, misappropriation of assets is it's broadly divided into two. One is misappropriation of goods and
misappropriation of assets.
Under that, misappropriation of goods and defalcation of cash. Right? So defalcation of cash can be done in two forms. One is suppressing the receipts, inflating the payments. What is the example for suppressing the receipts? Teaming and lading is the example. Correct? No? Teaming and lading is one of the classic examples for suppressing the receipts. Understood? Yes. Then why do anybody commit fraud? Because they will have their own advantage, their own reasons. Now these reasons are called what? Fraud risk factors. Why will anybody commit fraud? Why will anybody commit fraud? Because they will have their own reasons to say. Now these reasons are broadly put together under three main categories. What are they?
Pressures.
Sorry?
Some kind of pressure that's exerted.
Some kind of pressure. Very good.
Opportunity.
Very good. Opportunities.
Attitude.
Attitudes and rationalization of acts. Incentives or pressures, attitudes or rationalization of act, and opportunities. These are the reasons why anybody would commit the fraud. Now, there are examples for each of these under fraudulent financial reporting, under misappropriation of assets, for each of the categories. For incentives also we have examples. For opportunities also we have examples. For attitudes and rationalizations also we have examples. Please remember at least three examples under each area. Understood? Now, fraud will become even more problematic if it is involving collusion. What is collusion?
Group of persons
working together to hide the fraud.
Very good. When two or more people join their hands together and commit the fraud and present as though everything is normal, that is where it is called collusion. If it is perpetrated by collusion, it becomes even more difficult. Correct? No?
Yes.
Then, a misappropriation of assets, embezzlement of receipts, swaha. Swaha. Physical theft of assets. There is a computer. No, computer you can't do. There is a laptop. There's this jewelry. So that is physical theft of assets. Making entity to pay for goods and services which I never consumed. That means what? Paying against fictitious vouchers. And lastly, using it for personal purpose. Office car. Apart from office use, for everything it is used. Mysore ಹೋಗ್ತೀನಿ, ಹೈದರಾಬಾದ್ ಹೋಗ್ತೀನಿ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಹೋಗ್ತೀನಿ, ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಹೋಗ್ತೀನಿ, ಎಲ್ಲದಕ್ಕೂ ಆಫೀಸ್ ಕಾರ್ ಎತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಓಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು. ಪೆಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಆಫೀಸಲ್ಲಿ ಕ್ಲೇಮ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಸೊ ಯೂಸಿಂಗ್ ಎಂಟಿಟೀಸ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ಪರ್ಸನಲ್ ಪರ್ಪಸ್. ಆಫೀಸಲ್ಲಿ ಲ್ಯಾಪ್ಟಾಪ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಆಫೀಸ್ ಕೆಲಸ ಯಾವುದು ಮಾಡಲ್ಲ, ಮನೇಲಿ ಕುತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಗೇಮ್ಸ್ ಆಡೋದು, ಇನ್ನೇನೋ ನನ್ನ ಪರ್ಸನಲ್ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು, ವಿಡಿಯೋಸ್ ನೋಡೋದೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ. ಸೊ ದಟ್ಸ್ ವೈ ಯುವರ್ ಎಂಪ್ಲಾಯೀಸ್ ಆರ್ ಈವನ್ ಮೋರ್ ಇಂಟೆಲಿಜೆಂಟ್. ಯುವರ್ ಲ್ಯಾಪ್ಟಾಪ್ಸ್ ವಿಲ್ ನೆವರ್ ಬಿ ಫಂಕ್ಷನಲ್. ಆಫೀಸ್ ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಏನು ವರ್ಕ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ. Next, fraud risk factors, examples are very important. What is important here is 143 subsection 12. What is 143 subsection 12?
Fraud reporting.
Fraud reporting. What is the responsibility of yours as an auditor?
Report it to
Fraud is greater than 1 crore, we have to report it to the government.
To whom?
Central government.
Central government.
Central.
To the central government. Very important. What is the important word that you're missing? Individually. The fraud should individually exceed 1 crore. Put together, there are 4 frauds which the entity has committed. Put together, it is 1 crore. But individually, if it does not exceed 1 crore, then there is no requirement for you to report it to CG. Now, what is the requirement? Within 2 days of your knowledge of the fraud, please inform it to the board of directors that there is a fraud like this that I've identified or suspected or alleged fraud, and then ask them to provide their reply to your observation within how many days?
45.
Within 45 days, you're required to receive the response. If the auditor does not receive the response within 45 days, or in any case, upon the expiry of the 45 days, within the next 15 days, he is required to report it to central government. In what form?
ADT4.
Very good. In form ADT4. Which rule? Rule number 13. Rule 13. Now, what is he supposed to do? He's supposed to file the form. He's supposed to provide the details, the people who are involved, the possible amount of fraud. Now, the board of directors are required to report in their board's report the type and the nature of fraud, the amount, the likely amount involved, the parties involved is what auditors will mention. Here, additionally, what they will mention, remedial actions taken. The auditor is required to report it. Your study material, beautifully, they've given one chart. You can go through this, right? So individually, if it does not exceed, your responsibility is to report it only to the board of directors. Now, what is important in this fraud chapter? We have also connected standards with regard to CARO. Connected. Remember, I told you in auditing, what is important? Your connections are very important. Any concept that you are referring to, if it is interconnected to some other concepts, please do read it, because you'll be covering a lot of concepts together. Normally, Companies Act section, CARO, some standards on auditing related will be the points for you to connect. Some accounting standard, if you can do it, great. But these are the 3 areas that you're expected. Standards on auditing is basic. Second, some Companies Act related section. Third one is CARO. Normally, your answer will have these 3 connections. Whatever, if we are talking about related party example, what are the 4 things that I can think of? SA 550, section 188, and then I have CARO, related party reporting requirements, and then I have AS 18 with schedule 3. Sometimes schedule 3 may be required. Correct. So all these areas I will try to bring in my answer. By doing that, the quality of answer will go up. Understood? Yes. Next.
Yes, sir.
Auditor is unable to continue with the engagement. This is what? This has been asked in the last examination. I don't know whether they're going to focus it on again. What is this thing? The auditor is having an exceptional situation where he's unable to continue. What is he supposed to do? He's supposed to consider the legal and professional responsibilities, including reporting. Then he is to report the matter to those charged with governance, and where appropriate, management, and where appropriate, those charged with governance. And if at all, if he's deciding to withdraw, see whether is there any reporting requirement from his end. That is 143.12. And is there a need for him to communicate such a resignation or withdrawal to the people who have appointed him? That is, if you are resigning, you have to file which form? Form number ADT
3.
ADT 3 will be filed, will have to be filed by the auditor, resignation. Right? So that is what you have to remember here. Next, what is auditor's responsibility relating to fraud is extremely important in this chapter. First is what? My responsibility is not to detect fraud. If you don't tell, people will assume that you are responsible for everything. Tomorrow, if something, auditors are responsible for this. Why auditors did not highlight this? They will tell. Nation wants to know. They will ask. I can't answer what nation wants to know. Right? First, the primary responsibility of the auditor is not to detect fraud. It is the responsibility of the management to detect frauds, prevent the frauds. In the course of performing your duties as an auditor, if you come across any fraud, you're required to report the same. That's all. That's why they say auditor is a watchdog but not a bloodhound. Kingston versus Cotton Mills, right? Same old case law. Next. An audit is required to give only reasonable assurance. An auditor is not required, is expected to give absolute assurance because of inherent limitations to the audit, which makes the audit evidence only persuasive and not conclusive. That establishes a principle that even though an audit is planned and performed properly, some misstatements may go undetected. You can't blame me for this, please. Okay, please don't blame me for everything. Third point is what? Auditor should always maintain the attitude of professional skepticism owing to the possibility of fraud. And lastly, the auditor's ability to detect the misstatement is dependent on a lot of other factors, like fraud arising from the risk of fraud arising from fraudulent financial reporting is higher than that of the misappropriation of assets. The risk of not detecting the misstatement arising from fraud, management fraud, is higher than that of employee fraud. Why? Because management is at the position to override controls. ನಾನು ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ ಸೆಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನನಗೆ ಈಸಿ ಅದನ್ನು ಸರ್ಕಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಥವಾ ಅದನ್ನು ವೈಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಹೋಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ. It will not be possible for my employee, right? So this risk is always there, and it is also based on the skills of the entity, and it becomes even more difficult if it is involving collusion. Collusion makes it even more difficult for the auditor to identify frauds. These are all your responsibilities. Understood?
Yes.
If you just excuse me, I will connect my system to the charger. Just give me a second's time, few seconds time. Okay, I'm sorry. So what were we discussing?
So auditor's responsibilities relating to fraud.
Auditor's responsibility. So these are the areas that you have to mention when you're asked to write what are the responsibilities of the auditors as provided in essay 240. So these are some of the important areas in your fraud chapter. And there are a few examples that you have to remember that we have already discussed. Please go through the same. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Next. Then we move to audit sampling is one of the most important areas. I think Asha ma'am will cover audit sampling chapter. So I'll just leave that for now. If it is not covered, then we will meet again and then we will discuss. Now, then we move to understand the audit of items of FS. Audit of items of FS. That means vouching and verification chapter. Now, this chapter, what is the principle, fundamental principle that we discuss? First is assertions. What are assertions?
Representations made by management, explicit or otherwise, that are embodied in the financial statement. The auditor may, to identify the auditor a potential misstatement that may occur.
Very good. Assertions are what? They're the representations made by the management where they always believe it to be true. Management will always tell, now whatever I say, it is correct only. As an auditor, it is your duty to say whether these assertions are right or otherwise. Now we classify these assertions at 3 levels. What are they? Please do respond. No, I've been talking for the past 2 hours continuously. You can at least answer. and I've already passed my exams. It's your time. Assertions are at 3 levels.
Class of
Why are you thinking so much? What is there to think? Assertions at class of transactions, assertions at account balances, assertions at presentation and disclosure. Basic, no. You've forgotten everything. Forgotten history of our country. The Vijayanagara dynasty and book bari badnavella ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅದು ಮರ್ತೋಗಿದೀವಿ, ಇದು ಮರ್ತೋಗಿದೀವಿ. Okay, now assertions at class of transactions, what are they?
Occurrence.
OC accounts, occurrence, classification, accuracy,
Complete.
cut off, and completeness. These are the 5 assertions. Then assertions at account balances, ERCV, existence
and obligations,
right? Valuation and allocation, and lastly completeness. And lastly, presentation and disclosure is a combination of these two OCCA, occurrence and completeness, and then classification and understandability, accuracy. These are the assertions. So now what can be a possible question here? MCQs we have solved. Some MCQs we have solved and they've asked you to identify what assertion it is. Okay, that is very important. Please understand the item first. If it's a if it's a P&L item or if it's a balance sheet item, and then figure out which assertion will it fall under. Okay. Now occurrence is always for class of transactions. You can never have occurrence for balance sheet items. You cannot say that this has occurred. This is a result. Cash has occurred, another. Sale has occurred. Sale took place. That is the balance sheet, resulting transaction. Right? So now we are going to validate and test each and every assertion by performing audit procedures. And they will also give you one item and ask you what are all the assertions that are involved. Remember, we even marked in your material. Property, plant and equipment, 1 lakh, less accumulated depreciation, 30,000, net block, 70,000. What are the assertions involved? Remember?
Yes,
you don't remember?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the first part. Assertions are very important. And then these type of assertions are important. Under essay 240, we forgot to consider journal entries. In essay 240, we analyze journal entries. For the purpose of this essay, we divide journal entries into 2 parts. What are they?
Standard journal entries.
Very good. Standard journal entries and non-standard journal entries. Analysis of journal entries is coming from which standard? They will ask in MCQ. It is under essay 240. Okay. So now what are non-standard journal entries which are not frequent, which you don't pass regularly? What are the examples? Goodwill calculation entries that you pass on account of consolidation. Year-end adjustment entries, right? Certain memorandum entries that you pass, elimination of inter-branch transactions, all of them are non-standard journal entries, which requires attention from the auditor, right? So then what did we discuss under audit of items of FS? We have gone through the P&L items, we have gone through the balance sheet items. What is fundamental in this chapter is first to answer internal controls. Whatever be the point, your first answer should always cover internal controls. For example, they're asking you on the sales process. First, auditor should evaluate the internal controls with regard to the sales. Then you will verify the documents, invoices, purchase orders, then debtors entry, and then amounts is what you are going to verify. That's what you will do. Correct, no? Like that, each and every item you need to make a point. So here also connection, connected to income tax, connected to GST, connected to accounting standard, connected to schedule 3 requirements. For example, if they're asking you on employee benefit expenses, your answer should cover what? Yes. Internal controls. Your answer should cover
accounting standard.
Very good. AS 15. Your answer should cover AS 15. then your answer should cover Schedule 3 because employee benefit expenses, there is a separate disclosure. Employee benefit expenses should be disclosed as salaries and wages, contributions to employee and other welfare funds. And lastly, staff welfare expenses. And payment to directors requires separate disclosure. It comes under related party transaction. It comes under the provisions of section 197 of the Companies Act. So all those points you will mention. Under employee benefits, there is one area, training, hiring and appraisal. That point is important. Normally we will not read. They will ask, please do read training, hiring and appraisal process with regard to employee benefits. And there are a few corporate law related concepts. For example, buyback. They will ask you, what are the provisions with regard to buyback of shares? So you have to write the provisions of section 68. They are going to ask securities premium usage. Securities premium is a free reserve. Comment. No, it is not a free reserve. Securities premium cannot be used for all purposes. It can be used to only in certain cases. That section 52 you need to write. And then certain forms you may be required to file. For example, if they're asking about rights issue, you will write section 62 of the Companies Act. If they're asking on the bonus shares, capitalization of profits, then you have to write section 63. So whatever Companies Act knowledge you already have, you have to repeat it here in the auditing language. There you will write the company should pass the special resolution. Example, here auditor should verify whether special resolution has been passed with regard to buyback of shares in excess of 10% of the shares which are being bought back.
Yes.
Understood? Like that, you have to change your answer. See, this chapter is all about your common sense and the knowledge with regard to other chapters. Now, example, income tax they will give. So please write the computation of income tax should be made in accordance with the provisions of section of in accordance with Income Tax Act of 1961. Whether all the allowable expenses are being calculated accordingly. It is if it is based on certain judicial pronouncements. Check whether those judicial pronouncements are proper. And very important, is there a need for you to engage any expert? Because you may not be an expert in taxation tomorrow when you qualify. You are an expert in statutory audit. Then there is a need for you to engage an expert and try to obtain an opinion from them. All these points will have to be mentioned in your answer. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Any confusion here? And then very importantly, the next section is what? Disclosure requirements as under Schedule 3. Correct, no? We've already discussed. Investments, very important. Employee benefit expenses, cash and bank balances, share capital. Please go through all. All and all means all. Your first share capital disclosure, that is authorized, issued, subscribed, called up, paid up, less calls and arrears, add forfeit excess. That part you all will know. Second part is you have to disclose the shareholding of the promoters. And if there is any change in the shareholding of the promoters, that needs to be presented. This is an amendment to Schedule 3. So this is a possible area for examination. Schedule 3 has been amended very recently. So they have not asked these questions. So there is high possibility. And details of shareholders holding shares more than how much?
5%.
Very good. 5% should be separately disclosed. And then terms and conditions of the shares needs to be mentioned. Each class of share is for what price? In the event of liquidation, what happens? That needs to be mentioned. And you're also required to mention, are there any shares which are issued for consideration other than cash? Right? So that is what you have to mention here. And you're also required to mention, are there any buyback of shares? Are there any bonus issue of shares during the past 5 years? Are there any reduction in the shares? All those points needs to be mentioned. So share capital, please go through all. In all its entirety, you have to read share capital. Investments are very important. And then additional regulatory requirements are very important. Under that, we have cryptocurrencies. If the entity, last examination, they have asked cryptocurrencies. Now remember, when we were discussing Caro, so many points were new. We discussed. I told you that this is a new clause, this is a new clause, this is a new clause. Now, why is it come here? Because corresponding amendments have taken place in Schedule 3. For example, Benami transactions. Whether any proceedings are initiated under the Benami Prohibition Act, that needs to be mentioned. So, Benami requirements will be important. Cryptocurrencies, digital virtual assets, whether the entity has traded, that will be mentioned. And whether the company has any transactions with stock of companies. Now, I have entered into transaction with Rachana Limited. Rachana Limited is stuck off. It is amalgamated or it is liquidated. I have to mention that in my financial statements, and whether the entity has been declared a willful defaulter by any bank or financial institution, that needs to be mentioned in the financial statements itself. This is important. And whether the entity
short-term loans.
Very good. Short-term loans and advances have been used for long-term purposes, and whether the entity has availed any working capital loans, where the sanction amount is more than 5 crores, whether quarterly current asset statements are submitted, inventory statements are submitted, and quarter-wise differences needs to be provided. This is important.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ನೀವು ಓದ್ಬೇಕು, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಮರ್ತೋಗುತ್ತೆ. ನೀವು ಒಂದ್ ಕಡೆ ಬುಕ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಡೇ ಬಿಫೋರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಗ್ಲಾನ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲೇಬೇಕು. ಸಿ ನೌ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಪ್ರಿಪೇರಿಂಗ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ನೌ ವಾಟ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಡೂ ದ ಡೇ ಬಿಫೋರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್. ಡೇ ಬಿಫೋರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ನಾನೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ ನೋಡೋದಲ್ಲ. ಇವತ್ತು ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ODB ಅಂತ ಹಾಕೊಳ್ಳಿ, 1 day before exam ಅಂತ. ಅದನ್ನ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಶೀಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಯುವರ್ ಸ್ಟಡಿ ಮೆಟೀರಿಯಲ್, ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಶೀಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಯುವರ್ ನೋಟ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಬರ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಪೇಜ್ ನಂಬರ್ ರೆಫರೆನ್ಸ್ ಸಹಿತ ಬರ್ಕೊಂಡಿರಿ. When you do that, the day before your exam, if you can go through only these points, it will be sufficient. Because you will definitely not have time to go through everything. It is very easy for me to tell, but I know how difficult it is. Right? That is important. And that round tripping, whether the agreement is in writing or otherwise, intermediary, beneficiary, that needs to be mentioned in the financial statements. And lastly, audit trail, which is deferred, but it is there for you to know. Understood? These are the additional regulatory requirements. Now, today entities are also required to present key financial ratios, current ratio, debt equity ratio, their working capital ratio, their inventory turnover ratio, debtors turnover ratio, creditors turnover ratio, everything. And if there is a variation in excess of 25%, reasons for the same needs to be provided. What is numerator, what is denominator needs to be mentioned. So these are all the disclosure requirements. And some of the few important areas are what? Contingent liabilities, directors' remuneration, income tax payment, goods sent on sale or on approval basis. These 4 areas are important. Work in progress is important. And then what areas? We've discussed a list of points. That is on top of my mind. These are the areas. If anything comes up, it's already there. It's already there in the material. Please do read. Provision for gratuity is important. Okay, that is important. And then share capital. I've been telling you share capital is important. Employee benefit, I told you training, hiring, and appraisal. That comes again. And then recognition of dividend income, interest income is important. And profit on sale of investments. How are you going to recognize profit? Dividends, when will you recognize?
Only when it is declared.
The right to receive the dividend is established. This is what you have to write in auditing. When the right to receive the dividend is established, the amount of dividends can be measured reliably. That's why final dividend in the AGM, if it is declared in AGM, you will recognize. Interim dividends, when you receive the payment, you will recognize it as income. Interest income, time proportion basis, on accrual basis, you need to recognize. Profit on sale, when the transaction has actually taken place. This is what we have discussed. Incidental to this, we have to also connect to SA 501 inventory. Inventory is very important. If the inventory is material to the entity's financial statements, verification of the SA 501 deals with what? What aspect of an inventory?
Physical verification.
Physical verification. Why we are talking about physical verification? Because we want to satisfy on the existence and the condition of inventory. That's why physical verification is explained here. SA 501 is talking about inventories, particularly the existence and condition. Important MCQ kelbodu. So that's the reason why you use physical verification. Physical verification of inventory, auditor should attend it at the financial year end, unless it is impracticable. If the auditor is unable to attend the inventory verification as at the financial year end date, he need to perform the physical verification count at a different date, and he need to obtain evidence for the intervening period. You need to work back and see if it is performed, let's say in the month of April, you need to add back all the sales and subtract all the purchases and see what is the inventory count as at March. That's what he has to do. When he is performing physical verification, what is he supposed to do? He is supposed to evaluate the management's plan for this physical verification and the maintenance of the inventory. He need to take part in the inventory verification process and perform the test counts and inspect the inventory records. These are the three things that he is to do. Perform test counts, inspect the inventory records, evaluate the management's procedure for the inventory count and see whether it is reasonable. How are they managing their inventory verification? That is what you have to keep in your mind. And when the auditor is unable to perform the physical verification at all, what is he supposed to do? He is supposed to consider the implication of the same on his audit. See, is there any alternate audit procedure that he can perform? If not, then consider the need to modify his opinion in accordance with SA 705. That is what he is supposed to do. And what becomes important when he is deciding to evaluate the inventory? The materiality of the inventory to the financial statements, the assessed risk of material misstatement, percentage of completion, in entities perpetual inventory record maintenance system, how the inventories are being recorded. Is it perpetual inventory system or is it a different system? All these factors auditor is required to take into consideration. And then we discussed about contingent liabilities. Contingent liabilities normally a result of a litigation. What the auditors are required to evaluate with regard to litigations and claims? IRR. Inquire the management and where applicable the entity's in-house legal counsel on the all litigations and the impact on the financial statements. Then reviewing the minutes of the meeting and other records to evaluate on the status of all the litigations. And lastly, review of legal expenses account. This is what you have to do. Please try to connect 501 if you are referring to contingent liabilities. Understood? And also you can connect to one Companies Act rule. Rule 11 of Companies Audit and Auditors Rules of 2014. One area whether the entity has disclosed the impact of the pending litigation on its financial position in its financial statements. Remember, there are 5 points now: LLP, round tripping, dividends, audit trail. Actually 6. Correct? No? So connect like this. You have to start connecting to all the provisions. So this is what we have to do in audit of items of FS. Are we comfortable?
Yes.
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 Okay, I can't really go through each and every aspect now, but I'm just giving you. Are you finding it helpful or are you finding that this is a waste of time?
Helpful.
Helpful. Then we move to analytical procedures chapter. What is analytical procedures? Evaluation of financial and non-financial data through understanding the plausible relationship. Plausible means what? Reasonable. Right? Sale of pigs in some country to our dollar rate variation. What is the relationship? No relationship. No. So like that, you have to establish relationship. Those relationships should be meaningful. Now, what is important in analytical procedures then? We are talking about analytical procedures performed as substantive analytical procedures. So we are discussing SA 520 provisions. So what are the objectives? Objectives is when to use the analytical procedures, and normally substantive analytical procedures are used at drawing overall conclusions on the financial statements and validating whether his understanding of the entity and its financial statement is matching. When you're drawing the overall conclusion, let's say audit is all done, you're reading the P&L balance sheet. If I look at the entity's profitability, it is not matching, it is not in sync with what I had understood. Whether your thought process is like that, that is analytical procedure. And to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, you're going to use analytical procedures. Are you going to use analytical procedures only at taking conclusions? No, analytical procedures are used at the planning phase. It is used at the testing phase. It is used at the conclusion phase. Planning phase, analytical procedures as risk assessment procedure. Testing as part of your substantive procedures, you use conclusion, overall financial statements. When you're drawing the opinion, you are going to state, okay, fine. It is matching. It is marrying. Everything what I understood. You people were all very good. People were attending the classes regularly. You have attended mock tests. You have attended, reviewed the RTPs. So for your exams will be easier. So everything is having a relationship, one after the other. And my conclusion that you perform well in the exam is logical. So that's analytical procedure. Now, there are a lot of factors which affect the analytical procedures, substantive analytical procedures. What are they? Tilda. Spenda. Very good. Spenda. These are the factors which affects the use of analytical procedures. Correct, Da? Yes, yes. No. What is this? What do you mean by Da? I didn't know that Da means darling, it seems. Someone told, hey, don't use the word da. I will not use da for anybody, first of all. He said he's done R&D. In office, if you had done R&D in audit, you could have completed one. But he's saying da means da, darling. What nonsense is this? Okay, so now, Spenda, what is first? S. S is about?
Source.
Source of the data is very important. Now, what is it? Routine transactions. It's easier for you to perform analytical procedures. It becomes difficult for non-routine transactions because it is difficult for you to obtain the evidence. P talks about
predictability.
Predictability. Analytical procedures are more useful when you can predict the numbers. So analytical procedures are more apt for what type of items? Balance sheet items or P&L items?
P&L.
Balance sheet alva. Balance sheet or P&L? Sir,
if for example, if I'm taking depreciation, then I can predict, sir.
So what item? Balance sheet or P&L?
P&L.
P&L, no, why is there a confusion? There should not be confusion. P&L items are predictable. Rent 1 month gotadre 12 months in the estimate ಮಾಡಬಹುದಾ? Salary 1 month ಗೊತ್ತಿದ್ರೆ approximately next 12 months ಎಷ್ಟು ಅಂತ ಮಾಡಬಹುದಾ? Cash balance last year ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ಈ ವರ್ಷದ ಹೇಳಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸರ್ ಕೋಡೆ ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಕು ಒಂದು ನಿಮಿಷ ಹೇಳಿ ಅಂತೀರಾ, ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ, because it's a result of the transaction, right? So P&L items tend to be more predictable and analytical procedures are more apt if the items are predictable, if the item has a quality of predicting. Understood? Bangalore weather nim moodu predict madakala. So analytical procedures apply madakala illi. Next, SPA. A enandrenu?
Availability of data.
Availability of data. Analytical procedures will be effective if the more and more data is available. If the data is available at a very large level, at a very broad level, your results will also be limited. See, the more the information that I go on giving, the more the analysis that you can perform. ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್. ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಹತ್ರ ಹೋಗ್ತೀವಿ, ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಒಂದ್ 10 ಕ್ವಶನ್ಸ್ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಡಿಸೈಡ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ಏನಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ. ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಹೋಗಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಮಕ ನೋಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹಿಂಗಾಗಿದೆ ಹೋಗಪ್ಪ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ತುಂಬಾ ಫೇಮಸ್ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ಆತರ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಬಟ್ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಏನ್ ತಿಂದೆ, ಎಷ್ಟ್ ದಿನದಿಂದ ಹೀಗಿದೆ, ನಿಮ್ ಮನೇಲಿ ಯಾರಿಗಾದ್ರು ಇತ್ತಾ, ಇನ್ನೇನಾದ್ರು ತಲೆನೋವು ಅಂತ ಕೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ತಲೆನೋವು ಜೊತೆ ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೋವು ಬರುತ್ತಾ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋವು ಬರುತ್ತಾ, ಅಲ್ಲಿದ್ಯಾ ಇಲ್ಲಿದ್ಯಾ ಅಂತ. ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಅವ್ನು ಡಿಸೈಡ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ನಿಂಗ್ ಬುದ್ಧಿ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ. ಅದು ಡಿಸೈಡ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ನಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲೇ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಕಳ್ಸಿದ್ರು, ನಿಂಗ್ ಬುದ್ಧಿ ಇಲ್ಲ ಹೋಗಪ್ಪ ಅಂತ. ಅವನು ಇಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ಕ್ವಶನ್ಸ್ ಕೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಉತ್ತರ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ನಿಮ್ಯಾನ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಹಾಕ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ ನಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಯವರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು, ಮಾತು ಕೇಳಿಲ್ಲ, ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ 500 ರೂಪಾಯಿ ಕೊಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಿಮ್ಯಾನ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಷ್ಟೇ. So that's what it is. So the more the data available, it facilitates, and availability of data, not just availability, it should be reliable. Correct na? ಇವಾಗ ನಾನೇನೋ ಬಂದು ನಾಳೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ, ಬಾಗಿಲು ತೆಗಿಯಲ್ಲ, ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ರಿಲಯಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಕೇಳಕ್ಕೂ ಸರಿ ಇರಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ರಿಲಯಬಲ್ ಡೇಟಾ ಇಸ್ ವೆರಿ crucial and important for you to perform analysis. Next, in
Nature of assertion.
Nature of assertion, it is more useful for which type of assertion? Where is Siddarth? He is not there to answer. For which type of assertion an analytical procedure is more apt? Completeness, no. See, if you have to evaluate whether all the data or the entries or the transactions that should have been recorded, you can use your analysis. Okay, rent, 12 months rent book agilla, electricity March month in bill bandila anta account madilla, water charges purti account agilla. So it is your analysis which is making you to think that it is not complete, not by checking invoices. Correct, no? Understood? If a provision is very low, that means it is not completely accounted for. So completeness, valuation, you can use, see, GP ratio ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಿಮಗೆ idea ಇದೆ, that relationship with stock ಇದೆ. ಇದರಿಂದ you can analyze what is the value of stock that could be there. See, you know the sales, you apply GP percentage and you do some back calculation and you will have some number in your mind, ಇಷ್ಟಿರ್ಬೇಕು ಸ್ಟಾಕ್ ಅಂತ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟಾಕ್ ಏನೋ ಒಂದು ನಂಬರ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಮ್ಯಾಚ್ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ somewhere it helps you to establish that ballpark. Correct, no? So that's where analytical procedures are used. Analytical procedure is more apt for completeness and valuation than existence. ಇನ್ವೆಂಟ್ರೀಸ್ ಇದೆಯಾ ಅಂತ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ನೀನು ಅನಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದಲ್ಲ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕು, ಬಸ್ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು, ಆಟೋ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು, ಲಾರಿ ಎತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕು ಕಣ್ಣಿಂದ, ಗೂಡ್ಸ್ ಇದೆಯಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಅಂತ, ಅವಾಗಲೇ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗೋದು. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇರ್ಬೇಕು, ಇದೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿದೆ ನೋಡಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಜ್ಯೋತಿಷಿಗಳ ನಾವು ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಕೌಡೆ ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ನಾನು, ಇಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲೋ ಅದೊಂದು ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಇದೆ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರೋ ಕಳ್ದೋಗಿದ್ರೆ ಹುಡುಕ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತ ಕೈಯಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾರಂತೆ. ಸೊ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಕ್ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಇಲ್ಲ ಆಡಿಟರ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿ. ಸೊ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಅಪ್ಲಿಕೇಬಲ್ ಫಾರ್ ವಾಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸಿಸ್ಟೆನ್ಸ್, ರೈಟ್ಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಆಬ್ಲಿಗೇಷನ್ಸ್. ಈ ಫೋನ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿದೆ, ಇದು ನಂದೇ ಅಂತ ಹೆಂಗ್ ಅನಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ ನೀವು? ಈಗ ಹೂವೆ ಹತ್ರ ಅಷ್ಟು ದುಡ್ಡಿರೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಅವ್ನ್ ಈ ಫೋನ್ ಹೆಂಗ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ನೀವ್ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು, ಬಟ್ ಎಂಟಿಟಿ ಹೇಳಕ್ ಆಗಲ್ವಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ನೀವ್ ಹೆಂಗ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ? ಯು ಕಾಂಟ್ ಎಸ್ಟಾಬ್ಲಿಷ್ ದಿ ರೈಟ್ಸ್. You have to go by the documents. You have to check the documents. Only then you can analyze. Correct? No. Hey, why are you people so sad? What you want me to do?
Not sad, sir.
Your face is so dull. What happened? People have not had proper snacks, breakfast, lunch. No. Be happy, no. I'll go. ಯಾವಾಗ ಹೋಗ್ತೀಯ ಅಂತ ಕಾಯ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ. ನಂಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತು, ನಿಮ್ಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತು. ಹೋಗ್ತೀನಿ. ವೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಷ್ಟೇ. Next is inherent risk. If an item has high inherent risk, will you use an analytical procedure?
No, sir.
ಈ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಅಪ್ಪ, ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ಸ್ ಬಂದೇ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಸುಮಾರು ಜನ ಮಿಸ್ಟೇಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ನೀವು ಆ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಓದ್ತಿರಾ ಓದಲ್ವಾ?
ಓದ್ತೀವಿ ಸರ್.
ಸರ್ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಕ್ಲಾಸಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳ್ಸ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ, ನಾನು ಅನಾಲಿಸಿಸ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ, ನನ್ನ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಚುಯಲ್ ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಹೆಂಗಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾನು ಈ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಓದಲ್ಲ ಅಂತೀರಾ? ಅನ್ನಲ್ಲ. ರೆಡಿ ಟು ಟೇಕ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ರಸ್ಕ್ ತಿಂದಂಗೆ ಅಂತ ನಮ್ ಮೂವಿ ಇದದು, ಮೂವಿ ಸ್ಟೈಲ್. ಆಡಿಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಬಾರ್ದಂಗೆ. ಸೊ ಇಫ್ ಅನ್ ಐಟಮ್ ಇಸ್ ಹೈಲಿ ರಿಸ್ಕಿ, then your use of substantive analytical procedures is not appropriate. So they will ask, what are the factors that needs to be considered when you're using analytical procedures? Answer with reference to A, source; B, predictability; C, nature of assertion; ನೀವು ನಂಗೆ ಈ 3 ಹೆಡ್ ಗೊತ್ತು, ಒಳಗಡೆ ಏನು ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ವಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೆಯಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಇರೋದು ಓದ್ಬೇಕು. ಬರೀ ಸ್ಪೆಂಡ್ ಓದ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಮಾರ್ಕ್ಸ್ ಬರಲ್ಲ. That's what I'm trying to tell. Next, what are the techniques that are available for the use of analytical procedure?
Trend analysis.
Trend, ratios, structured modeling, reasonableness test. Trend ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು? Comparing it to the prior year data or information. Last year sales was 1 crore. This time sales is 0.5 crores. There's a marginal increase in sales. Last year rental expense was 50 lakhs. Is there a lag?
No, sir.
Excuse me. Last year rental expenses 50 lakh. This time it is 60 lakhs. What is the increase or what is the decrease? So that is our analysis. Ratios, you all know, relationship between two items. And then reasonableness test. We have been discussing this. COVID times, travel expenses should come down. If you are an importer, currently you should have forex loss, not forex gain. Correct? No. Now all the entities, if you are an IT sector, even now majority of the entities are working from work from home model. So your rental expenses should not be that high, right? Even though unlock has, it's been 1 year that we have come out from the lockdown mode, there are a lot of entities which are still working under work from home options. So you know it will not, these kind of expenses will not be higher, right? Rather their ISP should go up. What is the internet service provider expenses should go up. Reimbursements of Wi-Fi and internet charges should go up because everybody are working at home and you have to provide them Wi-Fi facilities. And then computer rentals. See, today what has happened, business models have changed. Today I don't want to buy assets in my own name. I would rather hire on need basis. For these projects, I will hire computers. After the project is over, I'll not use it anymore. So that's how. So see, understand the entity's nature, the current economy, your knowledge of entity's business, and try to validate with the numbers. Structured modeling, you can use some models. See, now chat GPT and bandittu, adva story helutte antu, poems bariyate antu, adu UPSC baritante papa fail aaytante prelims bejarin vishaya. Correct, no? So CA exams kotra probably pass agbodu because everything comes from your study material. It might pick, but UPSC it's real. It didn't clear the UPSC exam. Chat GPT. Next, how are you going to use analytical procedures as substantive procedures? First, determine the suitability, whether analytical procedures is suitable. Then establish reliability of the data. Because if whatever analysis you are doing, if the data itself is not reliable, obviously results will also be wrong. Correct? No, nimge wrong data kotre, right process madidrunu right result barutta. ನಮ್ಮ ಆನ್ಸರ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತ್ರ ನಾವು ಮಾತ್ರ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಎಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಇರೋದು. ರಾಂಗ್ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ತಗೊಂಡು ರೈಟ್ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಬರೀಬಹುದು ನಾವು. ಕೆಲವೊಂದ್ಸತಿ ಬಯಾಟ್ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತೀವಿ ಕ್ವಶನ್ಸ್. ಐ ಹ್ಯಾಡ್ ಅ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಟು ಬಯಾಟ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್, ಮ್ಯಾಥಮೆಟಿಕ್ಸ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ರಾಂಗ್, ಫಾರ್ಮುಲಾ ಎಲ್ಲ ರಾಂಗ್. ಹಿ ಹ್ಯಾಡ್ ಡನ್ ಇಟ್. ನಾನು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀನಿ ಫಾರ್ಮುಲಾ ಎಲ್ಲ ರಾಂಗ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಹೆಂಗೋ ಬಂದಿದೆ, ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಬಯಾಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೇನೆ, ಫೈನಲ್ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಬರ್ದಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಸೊ ದಟ್ಸ್ ಹೌ ಪೀಪಲ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ. ಬಟ್ ಹಿಯರ್ ಇಫ್ ಯುವರ್ ಡೇಟಾ ಇಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ರಿಲಯಬಲ್, then your analysis will also go for a toss. No? So establish the reliability of the data. Develop life ali the problem. Expectation. Expect that you people, I am expecting that you people will be good. Why should I expect that you will be good? Will not be good. Reality is that. So as an auditor, what is your expectation? Rent, you will have something in your mind. Okay, last year rent was 50 lakh rupees. Normal escalation in this industry, in this, let's say it is in a software park, is 5%. 50 lakh into 105% should be the rental expense. So that is your expectation. It may not be exactly the same thing, but somewhere here and there, if you are there, you can rely on it. Understood? So develop your expectation. This is very important. If you don't expect anything, then what will you verify and validate? And ನಂದೇನು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟೇಷನ್ ಇರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲಪ್ಪ, ಏನೋ ಆಡಿಟ್ ಕೊಟ್ರು, ಒಂದ್ 4 ಇನ್ವಾಯ್ಸಸ್ ಇತ್ತು, ಟಿಕ್ ಹಾಕೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಏನ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟೇಷನ್? ಏನು ಇಲ್ಲ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟೇಷನ್ ಅಂದು. ನೋ ಅನಾಲಿಸಿಸ್, ನಥಿಂಗ್ ಇಸ್ ದೇರ್. ದೆನ್ ಡಿಟರ್ಮೈನ್, ದೇರ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಡೆಫಿನೆಟ್ಲಿ ಡಿಫರೆನ್ಸ್. ಈಗ ನೀವು ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ ಬರ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಬರ್ತೀರಾ, ನಾನು ಎಷ್ಟು ಬರ್ಬೋದಪ್ಪ ನಿಂಗೆ ಮಾರ್ಕ್ಸು? 75 +50 -50 ಅನ್ಬಿಡುದು ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್. Sir, yen range kodta idea neenu. Yen range kodta idea. See, you have to determine what is acceptable difference. According to my calculation, rent is 58 lakhs. Entity has debited 59 lakhs or entity has debited 57 lakhs. Both are fine. But entity has debited 1.5 crores. You're still okay. Just how difference it. How the difference it. No, you need to understand what is it acceptable? No, it is not acceptable. No. Who will accept? So then you will have to investigate. The next step will be triggered only if this step is there. If you don't determine what, if you consider everything is acceptable, variation was 100%. So okay, parvagilla bidi. Can investigate ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ results. So determine what is acceptable difference. 5% variation, 6% variation, 10% variation. That is what you have to determine. And then investigate the results. If the variation is too high, investigate the results. And then finally, document these procedures as in accordance with SA 230. Understood? Next. When we talk about reliability, there are 4 components. What are they? Source, relevance, controls, comparability. 4. SCN. Source is SCR, corporate social responsibility, C square. Okay, na? Source, from where the data is coming from. If tomorrow I come up with a notification and say your exams are postponed, will you believe? No. ICA website important announcement. Important student section only. It is hereby informed that CA examinations have been postponed. Or postponed and preponed andre ella edodkombitirvi. Right? May exams April alle bartide andre ashte govinda. Right? So that is the source. Authentic source only BOS ICAI portal. The one which your firewalls are blocking. Please go and change the configuration. Next. Relevance. Needless to say, are we talking something which is relevant? No, absolutely not. But analytical procedure madbekadre relevant data na extract madbeku. Controls over preparation. If there are no controls, that's what we discussed. If there are no controls over preparation, how can you rely on the data? Not possible. And then finally, comparability. Data should be comparable. If it is not comparable, what will you analyze? Last year numbers, this year numbers, compare madake agala. See, that is the problem all of us faced. We had 2020 and 2019. We were trying to compare these two financials. But 2020 was an exceptional year. 2020 and 2021 COVID year. So ನಾನು ಏನು ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ 2020 2021 ಅಲ್ಲಿ because my previous year was COVID before pre-COVID and 2023 is post-COVID. Post-COVID has to be compared with post-COVID numbers. COVID numbers, how do I compare? I didn't have COVID before, right? So it becomes very difficult for me to compare. So it is very difficult for me to establish the reliability. Then precision level. This concept is important. What do you mean by precision? Whatever analysis you are doing should be precise. How do you develop that precision level? Based on the disaggregated information that you get. That disaggregation of data means what? Other expenses. I'll break it down into further. Professional charges. Under professional charges, payment to legal consultants, payment to retainers, payment to professionals, payment to IT advisors. That is disaggregated. Going down one step below, one step deeper is disaggregation. So the more the disaggregated data you get, the more the precision will be. Understood? And then you're going to investigate the results. When you're investigating, consider the possibilities of fraud also. So these are all covered under your analytical procedures chapter. Understood?
Yes.
So this is a simple chapter. Very easy. Please don't ignore. Okay. Then we moved. Can we move on?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
One more small concept, which is audit in automated environment. Very, very easy chapter. Important chapter. Please don't ignore, because normally as students, what do? We ignore this chapter. Ayo, IT anta. Very, very simple and easy to understand. Now, what are the important aspects that is there in this chapter? Why IT becomes relevant for your audit? Why I should rely on IT? Because computations are being made in the system, accounting entries are automatically posted by the systems, business processes, policies, internal controls are implemented with the help of IT, reports are generated through the systems, and then finally, access and security controls are being implemented with the help of IT. Because of all of these factors, IT becomes relevant. Correct, no? And then it is also understood the complex the business environment, the complex the audit will also be. Higher the complexity of the business process, higher the complexity of the IT environment, higher will be the complexity of the audit, because you have to audit in that complex environment. Correct, no? If patient problems are critical, operation also will be very, very serious. Correct, no? Simple agi yado ಒಂದು ಐ ಸರ್ಜರಿ ಮಾಡಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೂ ಒಂದು ಓಪನ್ ಹಾರ್ಟ್ ಸರ್ಜರಿ ಫಾರ್ 8 hours ಮಾಡಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೂ ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸ ಇದೆ. ರೈಟ್, ಇಟ್ಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಸಿಂಪಲ್. ಲೇಸರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ 10 ನಿಮಿಷ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದ ಹಿಂಗಾಗ್ತಾ ಹೋದ. ಓಪನ್ ಹಾರ್ಟ್ ಸರ್ಜರಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬಾ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಅಥವಾ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಯಾವುದೋ ಇಂಟೆಸ್ಟೈನ್ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್, ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿಸ್ಕೊಂತ ಇದ್ರೆ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಸೋ ಈಸಿ. Correct, no? So that's what it is. Now, why IT becomes relevant? Because huge volume of transactions are being processed with the help of systems. Second one, there are regulatory requirements. We have Companies Act, we have Internal Financial Controls, we have IT Act. Let's say you are the food delivery entity. A lot of your activities are running through the systems, right? And if you're a medical related activity, a lot of your things are stored in the system and it's being generated through the systems. So IT becomes very important. Complexities are higher today. If you talk about a bank, how many transactions bank will process in a day? It is based on the help of IT. So complex transactions. And then it is going to increase the efficiency and effectiveness in the process. If I hire 5 accountants, they may not do the job properly. But if I purchase a software, it does automatically. If it is doing automatically, it can replace all these 5 accountants. Correct, no? So it is increasing, it is going to increase efficiency and effectiveness. So that's why IT will be relevant for the audit. So now what is important? Auditors should understand the IT environment. So when we talk about you need to understand the IT environment, what understanding you should have? You should have the understanding of the entity's information system. What is their entity's information? Is it only one application that they're using, or the entire entity's operations are being managed with the help of IT, entity's information system? Purpose. The entity might be using IT for some financial information, that is your accounting software, management of their receivables, payables, or they might be using IT for their HR. They might be using for their CRM. They might be using IT for some other field, which may be non-financial. So you need to understand whether this automated environment, the use of IT is financial or non-financial. Location of the IT, whether it is locally procured ones or it is global. And then whether it is customized or whether it is purchased, off-the-shelf purchases, or is it customized to suit your requirements? Interface. See, the interface means how the systems are going to talk to each other. The outside part and the inside part, how is it interacting? Now, Zoom is an application through which we are meeting. It's a computer in the but something is running behind my screen, which is connecting you and me. So that is the interface. Architecture, whether it is cloud-based, whether it is desktop-based, whether it is client-server, whether it is web-based, QuickBooks, Zoho Books, all of them are online platforms. So data are being stored in cloud. There are some softwares which works on your desktop. For example, Tally. Tally is not online. Tally is desktop-based ones. Right? Then versions. Right? Modi 1.0, Modi 2.0 is a version. Next, we have ERP 0.1, ERP 0.2, SAP 2.4. Like that, we have a lot of versions. That becomes important for you to understand. And whether it is outsourced, what activities are outsourced? Maintenance, data storage, or the support services, or the entire system implementation. That is to be understood by the auditor and key persons. If you go ask any IT related question to the accountant, what answer you get, sir, everything is done by system. So you have to ask the IT guy. Should you ask a database administrator? Should you ask the compliance officer? Should you ask the CISO? Should you ask the technical officer? Should you ask the system admin? You should know to whom to ask what question. No. ಈಗ ನೆಫ್ರಾಲಜಿಸ್ಟ್ ಹತ್ರ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹಾರ್ಟ್ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ಸ್ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅವನೇನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ, ಏನು ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಪಾಪ. ನೆಫ್ರಾಲಜಿಸ್ಟ್ ಹತ್ರ ಕಿಡ್ನಿ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ಸ್ ಮಾತಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬರ್ಬೇಕು ಇದ್ರೆ, ರೈಟ್. ನ್ಯೂರಾಲಜಿಸ್ಟ್ ಹತ್ರ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನನ್ನ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮನ್ಸಿಗೆ ಹಾಕೊಂತಾನೆ ಹೇಳು. Now, what are the risks that this IT, because I'm using IT, there is always benefit and there's always the risk that is involved. What are the risks that are involved? Inaccurately processing the data or processing inaccurate data. One process set ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. That there is a lacuna in the process itself. Interest calculation, it is taking PTR by 100 ಬದಲು ಬೇರೆ ತಗೋತಾ ಇದೆ, PR by T ತಗೋತಾ ಇದೆ. Example, PR by T into 100 ತಗೋತಾ ಇದೆ. So it is processing the data in an inaccurate manner, or it is processing wrong data. E data ತಗೋಬಾರದು. It should not take the numbers from this particular area. It should take the data from another area, but it is taking this area. It is calculating foreign currency gain or loss. Foreign currency into INR ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಅದು foreign currency into foreign currency ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್. ಅಪ್ಪ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಏನೋ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. So that is what inaccurately processing the data or processing inaccurate data. And the problem is what? If it's a configuration issue, we call it as systematic error. ಇದು 1-2 invoice ಕಥೆ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಎಲ್ಲಾ invoices wrong ಇರುತ್ತೆ. I gave you an example also where the software was calculating the inventory value based on the latest purchase price instead of weighted average. Is it only for 1 part, 2 part, 3 parts? No, it is for all the parts. It will take only the latest price and calculate the value. Understood? Second one, whenever you hear about the term risk, what 3 things should come to your mind?
Confidentiality, integrity, availability.
Compromise to these points. That's all. Risk andre compromise to confidentiality. That means loss of data. And then unauthorized access to the data, unauthorized changes to the data, affects your integrity. And then lack of segregation of duties. Now, if I am the person who is in charge of the physical assets, I should never be given the access to the recording of the asset. What will I do? Conveniently, very good, access controls and permissions. I conveniently modify to match the physical requirements. Correct, no? Then, failure to make necessary changes. Some updates will be there in the software. Some upgradations needs to be made. If you don't do it, softwares will not work properly, efficiently. And then privileged access, giving you access beyond your job description. I am the person who is only going to process accounts payable. Why should I be given access to sales? Why should I be given the access to the fixed assets? What is my responsibility? Is to process the payables. Vendors, I should be given access to the vendors module. I should be given access to the purchase module, not anything else, right? So job-based description, accordingly, my right should be designed. Loss of data. So these are all the risk factors that is involved. Now, how this IT-related risk is going to impact your audit in 3 ways. 1, compliance procedure. 2, substantive procedure. And reporting. First, compliance procedure. What is the impact? You cannot rely on the data which is generated by the system. So you have to do more and more testing of the data to ensure availability, completeness and reliability. See, when you know that these softwares are not right, or there is some problem in the software, whatever report that the software is generating, will you rely on it? No, you can't rely. So what you have to do, you have to test more and more of those numbers which have come from the software. And finally, you need to perform more and more substantive procedures. That is the impact on, if the IT related risk has any impact on the controls, this is how it impacts your audit. How does it impact your substantive procedures? You have to do more and more testing, obtain additional audit evidence. That is what will be the problem. Then reporting, if this risk leads to any deficiencies in internal controls, then there is a reporting responsibility on the auditor's shoulder. What is he supposed to do? He's supposed to communicate it to management in case of deficiency. He's supposed to communicate it to those charged with governance when, if it's a significant deficiency. So how does he communicate? How does he report? In the form of very good, in the form of management letter or letter of weakness. Don't get confused with representation letter. That is coming under 580. Okay. And then is there a need for you to modify your opinion because of these risk factors? That is what will be impacting your reporting. Understood? Then most important factor is types of controls in automated environment. What are the 3 types of controls?
General IT controls.
Very good. General IT controls, application controls, IT dependent controls. Which one is considered to be pervasive control?
General IT.
General IT. Very good. General IT controls. Which one is called indirect control?
IT dependent.
General IT controls. General IT controls are called pervasive controls. They're indirect controls because they affect, they're more pervasive. Their impact reaches to all the areas of the entity. So it may not directly have control in one area, but it will have controls in different areas. So it's indirect control, right? So general IT controls, application controls, IT dependent controls. General IT controls focuses on integrity, security of the data. General IT controls has 4 components. What are they? Data center and network operations, program change, access security, application system development, maintenance. Data center means what? Backups, disaster recovery plans, and then how the networks are being operated, whether service level agreements are proper. All those things comes under data center. Program change, whether these, how the change management process is defined. Who is going to manage the change request? How is it going to be considered? How the changes are going to be made? How this testing take place? And then how does it being affected in the main environment? That is what will be coming under your program change. Access security is all about network security, physical security, system administration, password controls, data security comes under access security. Application development, it's all about system development life cycle. If you're developing a system, it goes through some 7-step process. Whether these processes are being followed properly or not is what we will have to check. Documentation, when you should go live, proper testing, decision feasibility analysis, constructing the entire system, before that design of the system, analysis, requirement analysis, all this comes as part of your system development. Application controls, what are the examples?
Yeah.
Reasonableness check, limit check, input validation, mandatory field, right? All of them, sequence number. See, finally, 4th letter cannot be Z. It can either be P, H, T, F, C, J, other. Right, so that is number sequence. GST number, first 2 should always be digits, state code. You cannot have EAA as your starting GST number. It will say invalid, right? And then telephone number, phone mobile number is 10 irrelevant, right? So these are all the examples for reasonableness. Mandatory field, you're trying to file an application, but it is not going through. It is asking, please fill this, that this field is not completed. So mandatory star marks, right? Those star marks are the examples. So they're all the application controls. Application controls are at a lower level. It is like a concentric circle. Outside is what IT general controls, inside is application control. For both we use, and we are We have third type of control, which is IT dependent. There are some manual controls, but they are dependent on IT. Example, there is a security guard who is going to sit at the premises. Now, the employee cannot go in unless he punches in or he shows his card. Card is there. Together with that, there is a security guard. So there is a manual control coupled with the IT controls. This is IT dependent control. Understood? All of you are completely sleepy?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. Now, what is the relationship between IT general controls and application controls? IT controls are needed for IT application controls, and both the controls are needed for efficient information processing. Understood? Both of them are interdependent, interrelated. What is needed for what is important? IT general controls are needed for application controls, not the other way around. IT controls defines what are the general IS policies, procedures. On that basis only you develop an application. It is not the other way around. ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತಾ? ಬೇಜಾರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಡಿ, ಬೇಜಾರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊ ಅವಕಾಶವಾಗಿ. ಓಕೆನಾ? ಮೂವಿಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ತೀರಾ, ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಸೀನ್ಸು ಇಷ್ಟ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ, ಬೇಜಾರ ಎದ್ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀರಾ, ಬರೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ವಾ, ದುಡ್ಡು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತೀರ ಅಂತ ಕೂತಿರ್ತೀರಲ್ವಾ, ಹಂಗೆ ಇದು. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, I have to test these controls as an auditor. I have to test these. ನಂಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತು ಟೈಮ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ, ಬಟ್ ಅಂದ್ರು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ನಮ್ ಜೊತೆ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ದಿನ ಆಯ್ತಲ್ವ ಭೇಟಿಯಾಗಿ ನಾವು ನೀವು, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇರುತ್ತಲ್ಲ ನಮಗೂ ಕಷ್ಟ ಸುಖ ಮಾತುಕತೆ ಉಭಯ ಕುಶಲೋಪರಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ವಿಚಾರಿಸ್ಕೋಬೇಕಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ದು. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು testing methods. What are the testings that you generally do? Which testing gives you best audit evidence?
Inquiry with
inspection.
ನೋಡಿದಾಗೆಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ ಮೈಂಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ? ಅಯ್ಯಯ್ಯೋ ಅಂತ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. Inquiry coupled with inspection gives the best audit evidence, which is highly effective.
Inspection. Inquiry is highly effective. Inquiry is
highly effective. Re-performance is highly effective. ಸುಮ್ನೆ ಬಾಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಬರ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಏನ್ ಎಫೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತದು? ಬೇಗ ಆಗತ್ತೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಅದು ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಇದೆಯಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಬರ್ತೀನಿ, ನಾನ್ ಬಂದು ಅನಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ತಾನೆ, ನಿಮ್ ಜೊತೆ ಕೂತ್ಕೋಬೇಕು, ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬೇಕು, ನಿಮ್ ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕು, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ ನಂಗೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆಲ್ಲ ಎಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ ಲೈಫ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಆಡಿಟಿಂಗ್ ಇದು ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಿಲ್ಲ ನಂಗೆ, ಬರ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ. ಇನ್ಕ್ವೈರಿ ಇಸ್ ಹೈಲಿ ಎಫಿಷಿಯಂಟ್ ಬಟ್ ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ಎಫೆಕ್ಟಿವ್. Re-performance is highly effective but least efficient. Understood? See, observation and inspection somewhere comes in between. So if we go from the efficiency order, highly efficient to least efficient, it is inquiry, observation, inspection, re-performance. ಕೆಳಗಡೆಯಿಂದ ಬಂದ್ರೆ effectiveness ಇಂದ re-performance, inspection, observation, inquiry. Why observation is third effectiveness? Because it only gives you evidence for that particular moment. ಇವಾಗ ನಿಮ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಂಗೆ ಬರೀ 7 to 10 ಮಾತ್ರ ಗೊತ್ತು. ಬಿಫೋರ್ 7 ನೀವು ಹೆಂಗ್ ಆಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಿ, ಆಫ್ಟರ್ 10 ಹೆಂಗ್ ಆಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಿ ನಂಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಐ ವಾಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವಿಂಗ್ ಯು. Right? It gives audit evidence only for the limited time period, and the fact that you are being observed impacts. ಈಗ ನಾನು ಯಾರೋ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದಾರೆ ಅಂದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಕಾನ್ಶಿಯಸ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಡುದು. ಮದ್ವೆ ಮನೇಲಿ ಊಟ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫರ್ ಅದಷ್ಟು ಹಾರಿಬಲ್ ಯಾವಿಲ್ಲ. ಫೋಟೋ ಹೊಡ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂತ ಯಾತಕ್ ಬರ್ಬೇಕು ಊಟ ಮಾಡೋದನ್ನ ಫೋಟೋ ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ? ಮುಂಚೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಕ್ರೇಜ್ ಇತ್ತು. ಅವಾಗ ನಾವು ತಿನ್ನೋ ಸ್ಟೈಲ್ ನೋಡಿದಿರಲ್ಲ, ಏನ್ ಸೊಫೆಸ್ಟಿಕೇಟೆಡ್ ಆಗಿ ತಿಂದಿವಿ, ಹೋಗಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಬೇರೆ ತರ. ಸೊ ದಟ್ಸ್ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್. ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಇಂಪ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ ಯುವರ್ ಆಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್. ಕಾನ್ಶಿಯಸ್ನೆಸ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ. Ritvik, don't be sad, don't cry. I'll not capture your video or photo when you're eating food. So next, what is important is internal financial controls. As part of internal financial controls, we have two things. Please be careful. Difference between internal financial controls and internal financial controls with respect to financial statements, they will ask in exam. Important. What is the difference? Internal financial controls is coming under section 134. It is applicable for all listed companies. But internal financial controls over financial statements may be applicable for different classes of companies. And internal financial controls is to be mentioned. The details of the internal financial controls and their operating effectiveness will be mentioned in the board's report. But there is a requirement for the entity to get the accuracy, adequacy, and the operating effectiveness on the internal financial controls with respect to financial statements. There is no requirement to obtain report from the auditors on IFC. There is only requirement to obtain with regard to IFC FR. Understood? This is the second point of difference.
Could you repeat the second point again?
There is a reporting requirement only with regard to IFC FR. Adequacy and operating effectiveness of internal financial controls with respect to financial statements. But there is no reporting requirement to obtain a report on IFC as such. Understood?
Yes, sir.
So what is the difference? First, in case of 134, that is IFC, it is mandatory for all listed companies, and it has to be mentioned in the director's responsibility statement and in board's report. Whereas IFC FR is a reporting responsibility of the auditor on the adequacy and operating effectiveness. Internal financial controls with respect to financial statements is not applicable for a private company. It is not applicable for a OPC. A woman, sorry. Someone sent a message. I don't know. I didn't get it. Okay, so it is not applicable for OPC. It is not applicable for any private company having turnover of how much? 50 crores. As per the latest audited financials, if the turnover is lesser than or equal to 50 crores, if the borrowings from banks, financial institutions, or any body corporate is less than 25 crores, then IFCFR is not applicable. It is not applicable for these entities. Okay. So these are the points of differences that you have to write. Then we have data analytics. We use, as auditors, even we have evolved from the conventional method of testing to data analytics, computer assisted audit techniques, CATs. Right. So what is data analytics? Extracting information from the huge data set is called data analytics. Meaningful information. You're going to use tools and techniques to extract vast amount of information, meaningful information from the huge data. That is called data analytics. Now, because we are dealing with data analytics is used by the auditors. What are the areas where we are using data analytics? Check the completeness. See, when you analyze the data, you will get to know whether the data is completely recorded, transactions are completely recorded. Selection of samples. You're going to use data analytics, right? Samples alenu eston data irutte adralli yavudan select ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. Correct, no? And then recomputation of balances. You can reconstruct the trial balance and see what is the trial balance which the software is giving. Then you analyzing journal entries, standard journal entries it can identify. So you can focus on all the non-routine transactions by checking the count of the number of entries. Sales count kotpudre, sales has repeated 100 times. Frequency bantu, mode bantu. Mode andre enu? The data which is repeated the most. So mode ira transaction ella standard. Mode yavadu tumba frequency kadme ide, that will be non-standard journal entry. The frequency of the repetition of that entry is lesser. So you will be able to analyze. Then fraud investigation and evaluating the internal controls and deficiencies, you're going to use data analytics. Now, what procedure are you going to perform? It is not related to data analytics, any process for that matter. Understand the business. Knowledge of the business is important. Define what is your objective. So today, what was my objective? My objective was to revise. So on that basis only I will devise my further techniques, right? Same way, and then identify the data from where you have to extract the information. Then extract the data. See, one big WhatsApp alli eston messages irutte, groups irutte, eston forward messages barre, alla important agalla namge. Naven ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ eliminate ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ನಾನು ಯಾವ್ದೋ ಮೆಸೇಜ್ ಕಳಿಸಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಸ್ಪ್ಯಾಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಹೋಗಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತೆ. ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ ಕಳಿಸಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಟಾಪ್ ಲಿಸ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಯು ಆರ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ದ ಡೇಟಾ. Why? Because you need to figure out what is relevant for you and then verify whether the data is complete, accurate, and reliable. And do your activity. Whatever data that you've extracted, you analyze the data. And finally, validate the results and confirm and document. And document the results thereof. Understood? Now,
Yes, sir.
if you identify any weakness, can you please bear for another 5 to 10 minutes? I'll be complete. I know there will be fatigue, but more than you, I am the person who's been talking. So I should tell. You're okay, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Not just okay, are you all happy?
Yes, sir. Very
Yes,
sir.
sir.
ಮನೇಲಿ ಊಟ ಮಾಡಕ್ ಕರೀತಿದ್ರೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ ನಾವು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. Okay, now if you identify any weakness in the controls, how are you going to respond to it? First, are there any weaknesses in IT controls? This is what you will question. Now, if these weaknesses are there, how does it impact your audit? Yado one CRM website data or the software is not working properly. There is a weakness. But how does it impact your audit? Customer relationship management. Messages alla hogad gutta. Hey Siddarth, it's your birthday. Manayavara naap katkolala. Adi yadu yavatto purchase ಮಾಡಿರೋದು. Hey Siddarth, we want to wish you on your birthday. We are missing you. We have been missing you ಅಂತ ಬೇರೆ ಯಾರು ಹೇಳಲ್ಲ, ಅದೇ ಹೇಳುತ್ತೆ. We have been missing you ಅಂತ ಅದನ್ನೇ ಹೇಳೋದು. Vrindavan stores wishes you happy Sankranti. We are doing all this. What is it? Jaggery, groundnuts ಅಂತ ನಮಗೆ ಮೆಸೇಜ್. Automated chatbots. Yes, that's what it's going to. See, banks and messages ಕಳಿಸ್ತಾರೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾ, happy birthday. So these are all customer relationship management. So ಖುಷಿ ಆಗತ್ತೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ. आपकी जन्मदिन का शुभ कामनाएं ಅಂದಾಗ ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ನೋಡಿ ನಾಪ್ಕ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮೆಸೇಜ್ ಕಳಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಅನ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು. So right, so if there is some weakness in that, it is not going. How does it impact your audit? It doesn't impact. But assuming that there is some problem in their accounting ERP, and ಅಯ್ಯೋ ಸರ್ ಬಿಡಿ ಸರ್ ಏನ್ ತೊಂದರೆ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಏನೋ ಒಂದು ಅದೇನೋ ಜರ್ನಲ್ ಲೆಡ್ಜರ್ ಪೋಸ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಸರಿಯಾಗಿ ಆಗ್ತಿಲ್ವಂತೆ, ಬಟ್ ಏನೋ ಬ್ಯಾಲೆನ್ಸ್ ಶೀಟ್ ಬಂತು, ಏನೋ ಡೆಬಿಟ್ಸ್ ಕ್ರೆಡಿಟ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮ್ಯಾಚ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದು ತಗೊಂಡು ಬ್ಯಾಲೆನ್ಸ್ ಶೀಟ್ ಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಟ್ವಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, no, it is impacting your audit. Boss, you have to understand it carefully. Then, if this deficiency that you have identified, is it chronic in nature? ಅಂತ ಅನಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಇವಾಗ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಹತ್ರ ಹೋಗ್ತೀರಾ, ಜನರಲ್ ಚೆಕಪ್ ಮಾಡಿಸ್ಕೊಂತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ. ಸೊ ಏನೋ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಯಾವ್ದೋ ಒಂದು ರಿಪೋರ್ಟ್ ನೋಡ್ತಾರೆ, ತುಂಬಾ ಸೀರಿಯಸ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಅಡ್ಮಿಟ್ ಆಗ್ಲೇಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಡಾಕ್ಟ್ರು. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಸಿಗ್ನಿಫಿಕೆಂಟ್. ಸರ್ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಒಂದ್ ವಾರ ಬಿಟ್ಟು, ಇವಾಗ ದಿನ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿಲ್ಲ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದ್ ವಾರ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಗುರುಗಳು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಸೇರ್ಕೋಬೇಡಿ ಅಂತ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದ್ ವಾರ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದ್ ವಾರ ಮೇಲೆ ಸೇರ್ಕೊಳಕ್ಕೆ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲಪ್ಪ, ಇವಾಗ ಸೇರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇಮಿಡಿಯೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಟ್ರೀಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಉಳಿತೀಯ. ದಟ್ ಗೋಲ್ಡನ್ ಅವರ್ ಇಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ದೇಸ್ ಏನು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ಸ್. ಇದು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಈ ಪೊಲೀಸ್ ಅವರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಇನ್ವೆಸ್ಟಿಗೇಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಗೋಲ್ಡನ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಪೀರಿಯಡ್ ಅಂತ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಈ ಕಲ್ಪ್ರಿಟ್ ಏನಾದ್ರು ನನ್ಗೆ ಸಾಯಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ವಿತಿನ್ 24 hours ನಾನು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ, ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಎವಿಡೆನ್ಸ್ ನ ಡೆಸ್ಟ್ರಾಯ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ ಟ್ರೈ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ವಾ? ಚಾಕು ಇಟ್ಟಿದೆ, ಚಾಕುನೆಲ್ಲ ಬಿಸಾಕೋದು, ನಿಮ್ ಬಾಡಿನೆಲ್ಲ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆ ಎಸೆಯೋದು, ಅಥವಾ ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಫ್ರಿಡ್ಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇಡೋದು. ಇವಾಗ ಮಡಕೆಲಿ ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಡ, ಮಡಕೆನೂ ತಣ್ಣಗಿರುತ್ತಂತೆ. ಅಪ್ಪ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಇದು ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇರೆ ಇದೆ, ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು. I am trying to destroy the evidence. So here also, that is very serious. So I don't want to miss that particular time frame. Same way, here I have identified a weakness and see whether that impacts my audit. The next point is whether this deficiency is a significant deficiency is what I have to evaluate. If it is a significant deficiency, I have to immediately report it to those charged with governance. If the deficiency is not a significant deficiency, then I will have to report it to management through management letter. Understood? Now, the moment you identify a deficiency in a control, are you able to concentrate? Is it fine?
Yes, sir. Yes,
sir.
No, sir, it's fine.
Okay. Now, if you have identified a deficiency in a control, don't jump directly and say that, no, this is not right. See, are there any compensatory controls? Remember, we discussed, if you are a small entity, you cannot afford to employ more number of people to implement controls. But every check is being signed by the director. I know I cannot do segregation of duty. everything is being prepared by my accountant only. Technically, it should not happen like that. But every check is being signed by me, the director. Yes, the controls are not there. But are there compensatory controls? Yes. What is the compensatory control? It comes under the purview of the director. Now, can you test these compensatory controls? If you have an option to test these compensatory controls, take the random checks on a random basis and see whether it is signed by director. It is approved by director. The voucher is approved, authorized by the director. If you can do this, you have tested compensatory controls. There is a deficiency in a control, but the entity has not implemented any compensatory controls. What I should do? I should check, are there any mitigating factors? No, there is no compensatory control, but at least are the employees honest? At least the entity in some or the other means check this, obtain confirmation from their vendors on a periodic basis, and are they matching it? If that's the case, payment madi, if you have not entered it, then it will be reflected in the customer vendor statement or the third party statement. At least are there any mitigating factors is what you will check. If yes, obtain evidence that these are the mitigating factors. You vaccination haksondilla. At least mask adru hakond odaಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀರಾ. It's a mitigating factor. At least social distancing maintain ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀರಾ. At least ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲೇ ಇದೀರಾ. These are all the mitigating factors. If there are the mitigating factors, test, document the results, validate. If there are no mitigating factors also, then evaluate the implication on your audit and see is there a need for you to modify your opinion. Understood? Any confusion? Now, what is a deficiency in internal control? A deficiency or a combination of deficiencies which are in internal controls, which are unable to prevent, detect, correct misstatements on a timely basis, or the controls that are required itself is missing or absent. What is significant deficiency? A deficiency or a combination of deficiencies which in the auditor's professional judgment requires special consideration. So that is what is significant deficiency. Understood?
Yes.
So with this, we complete the concept of audit in automated environment. Now, I want you to please go through few definitions which are considered to be important. Inherent risk, detection risk, control risk, sampling risk, audit risk. What is audit risk? Let's discuss. I'm very sorry, I'm going beyond my time limits. This one definition is important. What is audit risk?
Sir, the risk that the audit express an inappropriate opinion, like a unqualified opinion when the financial statements are materially misstated.
Very good. The risk that the auditor expresses inappropriate opinion when the financial statements are materially misstated. This part is very important. So, giving qualified opinion or modified opinion when you're supposed to give unmodified opinion is not audit risk. But giving unqualified opinion when you're supposed to give qualified opinion or modified opinion is an audit risk. Audit risk is a combination of risk of material misstatement and detection risk. Risk of material misstatement is equal to inherent risk into control risk. All these three definitions are important. Sampling risk, two erroneous conclusions, very, very important. Internal control definition is important. Assertion definition is important. Are you making a note of it?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Audit matters is important. Negative confirmation is important. Engagement quality control review, engagement quality control reviewer is important. Okay. And material uncertainty, tolerable misstatement, tolerable rate of deviation, anomaly, performance materiality. These definitions are important. Pervasive, important. and subsequent event definition is very, very crucial. Okay. Understood. Now I have covered the first part where we have tried to cover around 5 to 6 chapters. Now we are left out with, I'm trying to, in our next revision session, I'm sure you would have read all these things. Company audit, I will take it at the end because it can be read at isolation, right? So next, what we will do, we will discuss audit reports and allied standards. If we do that, we will be left out with audit of banks. And then I think that's all right. And some few standards, standalone standards, 550 is there, and then 299 is there, 560 is there. Those will be covered as part of our audit reports, but some of the standards like 510 is there, right? So 710 is there. Those standards we will be able to cover. And then we will take up car out 2020 and then finally company. And we'll see how Ashramam is going to cover the other concepts. I hope these sessions are making some sense to you and it is adding value to your knowledge, education at this point in time, because now your time is more precious and crucial than mine. I can come and afford 1 more hour, but you can't do it. So please judiciously use this time. Please do read. These revisions are not intended to cover everything. These revisions are intended only to give you a glimpse as to so much is there for you to read and go through, and whatever is considered to be extremely important, only that we can discuss for the paucity of time for sure. Okay, so I hope this session had some value to your study pattern, whatever is going on. Please do let me know if you require any modifications or the way in which it is going to be done. Now, I hope you've got the material, the revision material.
Yes,
no,
yes.
It's there. See, it's there in BOS portal also. Those who have not got it, you can go to BOS portal, intermediate, auditing, quick referencer, revision for quick references there. So that material is what I have given. And then there's one Excel which I'm going to share it with you. But this is going to be discussed on the day before your exam. If I do this, you'll stick to this only. That's why I'm not shared it with you intentionally. So that is a compendium of all the chapters which are given in journals. The student and the journal compile ಮಾಡಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. It is beautiful. Please, there are around 6 to 7 chapters beautifully drafted. Entire study material chapter is there. Please go through and read it. Okay, I have not done it. I don't want to take the credit. ICA has beautifully done it with charts, with flow charts, diagrams. It is very nice, colorful. Please do read it. No, it is compendium. It is there. I have shared the material. It is there in so many journals. They have added everything. So that itself is there in ICA website. They have hosted it. You can, and I couldn't tell you, please do solve MCQs. Please do solve MCQs. Okay, hopefully we will be able to meet and have one more session and see how we can try to get the best. You eat well if you have not eaten. You sleep well. I don't think there's a need for you to sleep because you've already slept in my class. If not, sleep well, maintain your health, extremely important, because often a lot of people are falling sick. So please do take care of your health. Exams are fast approaching. Those people who have not filled exam forms and all, check the due dates and do it accordingly. Don't take pressure. Read it with pleasure. We'll meet again in the next session. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir. Bye, sir.
Bye. I'm very sorry
Good
for
night,
extending
sir.
it half an hour. I'm very, very sorry.
Yes.